Chapter 1, The Encounter on the Street. The warmth of the afternoon still lay like a blanket over the narrow residential streets. Birds sang lazily from the trees, and the asphalt shimmered under the sun's last rays. In the middle of this otherwise calm scene lay you, Casper. Or rather, a version of you now so small that a coin could be a barrier, a curb, a towering wall. You could remember fragments, sitting at your computer, playing a game, your eyes growing heavy. A single blink, then darkness, and now, a piercing light, birdsong, and a body that felt alien in its size. You rose unsteadily to your tiny feet and immediately felt how strange the world had become. The grooves in the asphalt beneath you felt like valleys and mountains. You were used to thinking in calm order, 70-30 planning, but here, nothing was planned. Everything was chaotically huge. Still, you breathed slowly, the way you always did when your thoughts started racing. "Okay, one thing at a time," you muttered. That was when you felt a shadow fall over you. A rhythm of footsteps, soft yet enormous, approached. You looked up, and your heart skipped a beat. Looming above you was a figure. A girl in a school uniform, a red ribbon in her hair, the sun dancing in her warm eyes. She froze suddenly, blinked, and bent forward, her shadow swallowing the ground around you. "Eh?" Her voice was bright, trembling with surprise. There's someone on the ground?" She crouched, her skirt falling like a massive tent around you. You saw her face closer now, the friendly smile quickly shifting into a worried crease between her brows. Are you a tiny boy?" You swallowed nervously. Your voice was faint in the open air, but you gathered the courage to say, "My name is Casper. I only remember playing a game and then I fell asleep. When I woke up, I was here, small." Sayori covered her mouth, giggling nervously, her eyes glimmering with both curiosity and confusion. "Oh, wow. This is like something straight out of one of my silly dreams. A teeny tiny boy, just standing there in the middle of the road? That's crazy." She leaned closer, her breath washing over you like a warm gust of summer air. "But you look so real, not like a doll." You straightened your back, trying to hold on to your calm, even though her sheer presence made your body feel even more fragile. "I'm real," you said firmly, though your voice could barely compete with the sound of her heartbeat, pounding in the air like drums. She smiled gently. "You sound really calm. I think I'd be panicking if I woke up like that, but you seem steady." She gave you a playful wink. "You must be pretty brave, Casper." Something in her tone made it easier to breathe. She was light, warm, and her playful nature shone through, even in this bizarre situation. You noticed how she shifted instantly between giggling and looking serious, as if her heart was always balancing between sunshine and shadow. Suddenly, she reached down, her palm so vast it spanned the street. She opened it, fingers arching protectively around you like pillars. "Come on, hop in. You can't just stay here. What if someone walks by and doesn't see you?" You hesitated. Your natural caution tightened in your chest. You liked clear plans, predictable steps. Climbing into a hand bigger than your house felt anything but predictable. But then you saw her gaze, sincere, caring, almost pleading, and you knew you would have to trust someone if you wanted to survive in this enormous world. "Okay," you whispered, stepping forward. With a small leap, you stood in her palm. The surface was warm, soft, and her fingers curled slightly around you, without closing fully. She looked down at you with a mix of fascination and tenderness. "There," she said, her smile widening as if she was holding a secret treasure. "Now you're safe, Casper, and I promise I'll take care of you." And in that moment, as her words sank in, you knew your life had been turned upside down. From now on, you were part of her world, a world where you could only rely on calm, honesty, and the strange girl who looked at you as if you were both fragile and irreplaceable. Chapter 2. At Sayori's house. Sayori's hand was like a living cradle as she walked. Every step sent gentle tremors through your body, and you could feel how her fingers held you with a care that was both protective and light. She hummed softly to herself, a small, bright tune, while houses and fences slid past like gigantic stage props. "Don't worry, Casper," she said, as if she could sense your unease. "We'll be home soon. No one's going to step on you while I'm here." She glanced down, her eyes glinting in the afternoon sun, and you felt a pang in your chest. Not fear, but a mix of something you dreamed about for years, now so real it felt almost unreal. "I've fantasized about this for years," you thought. being small, looking up at a girl so big her palm is my whole world. And now it's happening. But how could I ever tell her? She'd never understand. She'd think I was weird. You kept your thoughts hidden as she carried you along. Soon she stepped into her house. The door creaked like the gate of a medieval castle, and her footsteps echoed on the floorboards. She tiptoed across the hallway as quietly as she could, but even her calm steps were like earthquakes to you. She opened the door to her room, and you saw a place overflowing with her personality. Bright walls, colorful posters, little stuffed animals on the shelves, and the bed, a mountain range of pillows and blankets. "Welcome to my place," she said proudly. She sat on the edge of the bed, and you felt the mattress sway like shifting ground. Carefully, she set you down on her nightstand, beside a lamp and a small stack of notebooks. From your perspective, the lamp was like a lighthouse, the books like a wall. You looked up, and there she sat. A girl, enormous as a goddess, but with a softness in her eyes that could melt the hardest ice. She rested her cheek in her hand and watched you. "You look so tiny from there," she whispered as if afraid to scare you. "But also cute. I hope you're not too scared." You hesitated, holding your hands close to your body, and answered honestly but quietly, "I'm not that scared when it's you. You seem kind." She lit up, her smile wide and sunny. "I'm glad, Casper. I promise I'll be careful." She leaned closer, her hair spilling like a waterfall over the edge of the table. You could feel her breath, warm and gentle, washing over you. "She has no idea what this does to me," you thought as you looked up, standing so small in front of her, being in her hands. "I should be scared, but instead it feels like a dream I've always had. But if she knew, she'd think I was strange. No, I have to keep it to myself, for now." "You must be tired," she suddenly said, sitting up. She found one of her soft handkerchiefs in a drawer and carefully folded it into a tiny mattress on the nightstand. "Here," she said, placing it in front of you. "Your very own little bedding. It's not much, but I think you deserve to be cozy." You sat down on the fabric, which felt vast and soft like a mattress in a luxury hotel. You looked up, your heart pounding, and the urge to say thank you battled with your embarrassment over how much you truly enjoyed this. "Thank you, Sayori," you said, your voice quiet but genuine. She laughed lightly, like bells in the summer breeze. "It's nothing at all. I want to do everything I can to make you feel safe." As you lay down in the improvised bed, you watched her draw the curtains and sit back down on her bed. She cast one last look at you, her eyes glowing with warmth, before pulling her legs up and leaning back. "I'm really here," you thought. "A dream I've always had, but for real." She sees me as a friend, someone she wants to protect. And I carry a secret I don't dare share yet. The lamp on the nightstand cast a warm glow over you both, and in the safe silence between you, it felt as if the world outside no longer existed. Chapter 3. Tears on the Nightstand. A few hours had passed since Casper closed his eyes on the soft handkerchief that served as his bed. His sleep was so deep that, for a moment, he forgot everything about his situation. But now he was awakened, not by noise, but by a scent. A warm, homey smell slipped in under the door like a hand gently stroking his senses. Food. Casper sat up, rubbed his eyes, and a sting of unreality struck him at once. The desk lamp towering above him like a lighthouse, the notebook standing like walls, and the enormous bed in the background where Sayori had been sitting. He was still small, so unbelievably small. He stood up, but his knees trembled. Why? The thoughts hit like sharp whiplashes. Why am I like this? Why do I only remember a game, some sleep, and then this? Is it a dream? A fantasy? Or am I trapped in something that can never be undone? He moved closer to the edge of the nightstand, staring out at the vast room. His heart pounded hard. The sight of her stuffed animals, her posters, her bed, all of it 10 times larger than himself, made it all feel even more unreal. And in the middle of it, the image of her, Sayori, huge, beautiful, impossibly gentle. His legs gave out. His body shook. Fear became a knot in his stomach, and at last it burst. Tears welled up, and soon he was sitting there, a tiny figure on a nightstand, quietly sobbing in the huge room. The door creaked. Light footsteps approached, and a shadow stretched across the floor. Sayori entered, carrying a small tray in her hands. When she saw him, she stopped abruptly. Her eyes widened, and without hesitation, she knelt in front of the table. "Casper?" Her voice was soft, but now colored by pure concern. She set the tray down and placed her hands on the edge of the nightstand so her face was very close to his. Those big blue eyes, filled with care, searched for his. "Are you crying?" Casper hid his face in his hands, but the trembling in his body gave him away. Sayori's expression changed. The usual playful spark was gone. All that remained was warmth. She lifted her hand, opened it slowly, soft as a pillow, and placed it near him. "Come here," she said quietly. Casper hesitated, but when he saw her gaze, no laughter, no teasing, only care, he stepped forward and let himself fall into her palm. She lifted him slowly, holding him close to her chest, like a treasure she feared to lose. "You don't have to be afraid," she whispered, her voice trembling with tenderness. "I know this must feel scary, but you're not alone. I'm here. I'll take care of you." She brought him up to her cheek and let him feel the warmth of her skin. The tears on his face disappeared against her soft touch, and her warm breath wrapped around him like a blanket. Casper sobbed again, but now it was quieter, eased by her closeness. His heart still pounded, but slower, calmed by her steady rhythm. She smiled gently, and for the first time in a long while, a little giggle escaped her. "See? You're safe now. And you know what? I made food. I thought you must be hungry. Should we eat together?" She carefully placed him back on the nightstand, where she had set a plate with bread, some fruit, and a glass of juice for herself. Next to it, on a little lid, she had placed a few breadcrumbs and fruit pieces, all in miniature, so he could have his share. Sayori folded her hands in front of her, tilted her head, and gave a big, bright smile. "Welcome to our little dinner, Casper. Just you and me." And for the first time that day, it felt like the fear was mixed with something else, a budding sense of closeness, even in a world that had become so impossibly large. Chapter 4. Table Talk. Sayori carried him gently in her hands as she walked through the living room. Her footsteps echoed on the floor like heavy drum beats, but her grip was steady, soft, almost rocking. She had set a small plate for herself at the dining table, and next to it stood a lid she had covered with tiny crumbs and little pieces of fruit, an improvised meal for Casper. She placed him in the middle of the lid, pulled in her chair, and folded her hands under her chin so her enormous eyes rested on him like two skies. "So," she drew it out, playful but gentle. "Casper, right? That's the only thing you remember?" He nodded quietly, keeping his hands folded in front of him. "Yeah, that's all. I remember my name. And I remember sitting and playing a game, but everything after that is a blur, like someone erased the pages from my book." He looked down at the crumbs in front of him. Even reaching out and breaking off a tiny piece of bread felt absurd when he had once been normal. His hands trembled a little, and he felt a knot in his stomach. Sayori's gaze softened with empathy. She tilted her head to the side, her hair falling like a blanket over her shoulder. "That sounds scary," she said softly, "not knowing who you are. But you know what?" She straightened up and gently laid a finger on the tabletop near him, so big it could have covered him completely if she touched him. "As long as you're here, you're Casper, and that's enough." He looked up. Her voice was simple, but those words broke through something inside him. He felt tears threatening again, but he fought them back. "Thank you for being so kind to me. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't found me." She giggled softly, but it was a gentle giggle, not teasing. "Of course! I could never leave a little guy like you alone on the street. You're my She thought for a moment, pressing a finger to her lips and smiling. "My secret friend." She took a bite of her bread, still watching him. Between mouthfuls, she started talking, as if she wanted to fill the silence to ease his anxiety. She told him about her day, how she had been out shopping, how she almost dropped a bag on the way home, how she chatted with a neighbor who asked for directions. Small, simple things, but her voice was full of life. Casper listened as he slowly ate his little portion. Her words were ordinary, but that was exactly what made them an anchor in the chaotic situation. Hearing about something so everyday from a girl so gigantic gave him a strange sense of calm. But every time he looked up at her, trembling with nerves, the thought returned. Why can't I remember more? Who am I, besides my name? Why did this happen? Sayori suddenly leaned closer, her breath gently caressing him. "You still look a little scared," she said softly. "But that's okay. Maybe you'll remember more tomorrow. We'll take it one day at a time, okay? Casper nodded slowly. One day at a time, he repeated, feeling a stab of gratitude. She smiled warmly, her cheeks lifting. Good, then there are two of us in this. And until then, she winked playfully, I can teach you all about what I do every day. Maybe you'll forget to be so nervous. He couldn't help but smile a little. For the first time since he woke up, it felt like the fear was being kept at bay. Chapter 5. A Conversation of Words and Shadows. The light from the dining table lamp cast a warm circle across the tabletop. Outside, darkness had fallen and the world was quiet. But inside, voices brought life, passing back and forth between the tiny figure on the lid and the girl sitting forward with her chin resting in her hands. Sayori had been talking for a long time, at first about small things from her daily life, but soon the conversation drifted somewhere else. Her eyes lit up as she mentioned, I'm actually part of a club at school, a literature club. Casper looked up, curiosity piqued. Literature? She nodded eagerly, her ribbon swaying with the motion. Yeah, we meet every day after school, just us girls. We write poems, read aloud, share ideas. It might sound a little boring, but it's actually the best thing I have. She beamed, and for a moment she looked like sunlight itself. Tell me about them, Casper said, leaning forward a bit. She spoke at first with ease, as if each word was a colorful ribbon she pulled from her heart. Yuri, so absorbed in her books that her words felt like falling into a deep well. Natsuki, who could be prickly and stubborn, but hid a burning passion for manga and baking. And Monica, always in the center, smiling, clever, with a presence that could fill the room. Sayori smiled as she talked, but then her expression slowly changed. She looked down at the tabletop, tracing a finger along the grain of the wood. I love being with them, she said softly. But sometimes... She hesitated, her voice weakening. Sometimes I feel like I'm just the funny, silly girl in the background, the one who makes everyone laugh, but not really someone who matters when it comes down to it. Casper felt a knot in his stomach. He saw her shoulders sink a little, as if the weight of an invisible burden had settled there. Sayori? He began, but she quickly lifted her head again and smiled wide, too wide, almost like a mask. Ah, sorry, she laughed, waving her hand. That was a weird thing to say. I just wanted to tell you about the club, heh? But her eyes revealed something else, a flicker of hidden pain, before she straightened and pushed the thought away. Enough about that. I'd rather hear more about you, Casper. What did you like before all this? Casper hesitated. He only had his name, only faint fragments of memory. I can't remember. His voice was quiet, and for a moment it was him who felt the weight of emptiness. Sayori leaned a little closer, her gaze softening again. Then we'll have to figure it out together, she said, almost like a promise. A quiet moment filled the room, where only the sound of their breathing existed. And in that moment, it felt as if two souls, one hidden behind forgetfulness, the other behind a smile, had found a shared point of recognition. Chapter 6. Masks and Weaknesses. Casper sat on the lid in front of her, the little piece of bread in his hands forgotten. He looked up at Sayori, who was still smiling brightly, but behind that smile was something he couldn't ignore, something that grated against the surface. Sayori, he said quietly, his voice nearly swallowed by the vast silence of the table. I want to know more about you, if that's okay. She blinked, surprised, as if she hadn't expected that question. About me? Yes. He took a deep breath. You always seem so happy, and that's wonderful. But he hesitated, feeling a tremor in his tiny body, but continued, if you ever feel like you want to let something out, it's okay. I know what it's like to be the one who smiles even though you're struggling. Her eyes widened a little. She leaned in closer, her shadow falling over him. You've been through that? Casper nodded slowly. I'm starting to remember little things. I was happy almost all the time, or that's how people saw me. But underneath, I was fighting with myself. I learned that showing weakness can actually be a strength, that people can get closer when you don't hide everything. Sayori stared at him for a moment, her big eyes glassy. She opened her mouth, but no words came at first. She rested her cheek in her hand, drumming her fingers softly on the table. You sound like me, she whispered. Casper looked up. She turned away toward the window, where the darkness outside pressed in like a backdrop. I'm always the happy one, the silly one who makes jokes. Everyone expects me to bring the light with me, but she paused and her shoulders dropped. Sometimes it feels like all the light I share just empties me inside, and when I'm alone, it gets so heavy. Casper felt a chill run through his tiny body. There was something heartbreaking about seeing such a big, beautiful girl sitting there and admitting something so fragile. He stood, stepped closer to the edge of the lid, as close as he dared to her finger resting on the table. Sayori, that doesn't make you weak. It makes you real. She took a deep breath, her eyes shining for a moment, but then she smiled again, a gentler, more honest smile this time. Thank you, Casper. It's nice to hear that from you, even though you're so small. She laughed softly, but there was warmth in her laughter now, not a mask. She pushed her plate aside and laid both hands on the table, as if to create a protective space around him. Maybe we can help each other. If you remember more, you can share it with me. And I'll try to share a little more of my heart with you. Casper nodded, and a small smile spread across his face. For the first time, it didn't feel like he was alone in his uncertainty. Chapter 7, The honest evening darkness had completely settled around the house. The lamps cast soft circles of light over the table, but everything outside was silent and black, as if the world had shrunk down to just the two souls at the dining table. A tiny man, Casper, and the girl who sat like a giant, yet felt so vulnerable in this moment. Sayori sat leaning forward, her hands folded on the tabletop, her eyes cast downward. Her usually cheerful voice was quiet, almost broken. Casper, I want to tell you something I don't tell anyone else, not even my friends in the club. Casper straightened up, his heart beat quickly, both because she was confiding in him and because he knew how hard it was. I'm listening, he said calmly. She took a deep breath. I'm always happy, or that's what everyone thinks. I make jokes, I laugh, I bring energy, and they think she's fine. But the truth is... She looked up, her eyes glossy. I struggle so much. When I'm alone, everything feels heavy, like I'm not good enough, like I'm just a burden. I carry smiles for everyone else, but when the door closes, it feels like I'm sinking. Casper felt her words strike deep. They reminded him of his own experiences, the masks he himself had worn. He stepped closer to the edge of the table so she could see him clearly in the lamp's glow. Sayori, he said quietly, but firmly. It takes strength to say what you're saying now, to admit how you really feel inside. You might think you're doing everyone a favor by always being happy, but the truth is, people need to see you too. The real you. Not a mask, not a fake version, just Sayori. She sniffled softly, letting a finger brush across her cheek where a tear threatened to fall. But what if they don't like who I really am? What if they lose interest when I'm not always sunshine? Casper took a deep breath. His body was small, but his words carried a weight that filled the room. Then it's better to know, because the people who stay with you when you show your vulnerability, those are the people who matter. You don't have to be someone else to deserve a place in someone's life. She stared at him, her eyes wide and full of a mix of fear and hope. Then she slowly lifted her hand, placed it on the table in front of him, and opened her palm. You're so small, and yet your words feel so big. Casper stepped forward and placed his hand against her skin. It was warm, soft, pulsing with life. I'm saying this because I know how it feels. I've tried hiding behind a smile myself. But I learned that strength isn't about being perfect. It's about daring to be real, even when you feel weak. A quiet moment lingered in the air. Sayori's shoulders dropped, as if a weight had been lifted. She let a tear fall, but this time she didn't wipe it away. She smiled, but the smile was different, smaller, more genuine. Thank you, Casper, she said, her voice trembling. I don't think I could have said this to anyone else. Casper felt his chest tighten with empathy, but also with something that felt like a bond, stronger than words. He nodded. You don't have to carry it alone anymore. She gently closed her hand around him, as if she wanted to keep him close to her heart. And even though he was so small, it felt as if he filled her whole world in that moment. Chapter 8, When the Mask Breaks. The silence in the room had a strange weight, as if the walls themselves were listening. Sayori still held Casper in her hand, but her gaze was flickering. The smile she had fought so hard to keep in place was gone. Casper, her voice cracked, weak and broken. I I can't do this anymore." She gently set him back on the nightstand, but her hands trembled so much that he had to steady himself to avoid falling. She hid her face in her hands, and her shoulders began to shake violently. "Everyone thinks I'm the happy, sweet Sayori," she sobbed. "The one who makes them smile. But I'm empty inside. I wake up every morning, and it feels like the whole world is pressing me down, and I have to fight just to breathe. I hate that I hide it, and I hate that I can't stop it." She slammed her hands onto the table with a crash. Casper tumbled backward, everything around him echoing with the force. He stared up at her, so gigantic yet so fragile. Tears streamed down her cheeks like rivers falling from mountain peaks, dripping onto the table beside him. Casper was shaking too, but he stepped forward, as close to her hand as he could. "Sayori," he shouted, even though his voice was tiny in the vast room. "Listen to me. You're not alone. You don't have to keep it inside anymore." She lifted her head, her eyes red and shining, raw with pain. "But I disappoint people when I show it. I ruin their day. Who wants to be around someone who's always sad?" Casper took a deep breath, gathering all his calm and strength. "I do," he shouted back, his voice nearly breaking, but the words were honest. "I want to be here, even when you're not smiling. I don't want a fake Sayori. I want the real one with everything, even when it hurts." She stared at him, her lips trembling. "Why? Why would you want that?" He walked right up to her finger, placed both his hands against it like an ant pressing itself against a pillar. "Because real strength isn't being perfect. It's daring to show that you're not. And you're stronger than you think, Sayori." A sob burst from her, but this time it wasn't only pain. She lifted him gently, almost desperately, and pressed him to her chest. He could hear her heartbeat, uneven and wild, but still beating. Still alive. She held him close, tears still flowing. "Casper, I'm so scared," she whispered. "Scared of losing people, scared of being a burden, scared of ending up alone." He placed his tiny hand on her skin, even though she could barely feel it. "I'm here, right here, and I'm not going anywhere." She closed her eyes, clinging to the little being in her hands as if he were the only thing keeping her from falling apart completely. And in that moment, even through fear and darkness, she found an anchor in him. Chapter 9. The Quiet Night. Sayori's breathing was still uneasy, her shoulders shaking with small tremors, but the crying was beginning to settle. She sat on the bed with Casper in her hands, holding him close against her, as if she feared he might disappear if she let go. Casper looked up at her face, the tracks of tears still glistening in the lamplight. She looked exhausted, but also open, as if she had finally taken off a heavy mask for the first time. "Sayori," he began, his voice small but steady. "I know you feel like you have to carry it all alone, but you're not alone. Your friends, Yuri, Natsuki, Monica, they don't sound like people who would leave you just because you show how you really feel. On the contrary, they'd probably love you even more for sharing it." She blinked, her eyes full of doubt, but also a faint glimmer of hope. "Do you really think so?" Casper nodded. "Yes, I can hear it in the way you talk about them. They mean a lot to you, and I can almost hear that you mean a lot to them too. They would never turn their backs on you. You're not a burden, Sayori. You're a gift in their lives, just as you are." She sighed, a long, trembling exhale. "I wish I could believe that all the time." "Then let me remind you," he said. "When you forget, when the darkness creeps in, I'll be here to tell you that you're not alone. And if I can see it, they can too." She stared at him for a moment, and slowly a small, genuine smile grew on her lips. Not a wide, forced grin, but a careful, quiet smile, born of gratitude. "You really are something special, Casper," she murmured. "So small, and yet it feels like you fill the whole room with your words." She pulled the blanket up around herself, and with a gentle motion placed him on her pillow, right beside where she would lay her own head. "I'm so tired," she said with a little yawn. Maybe I can sleep now." Casper sat down on the fabric, enormous compared to his body, but soft and safe. He watched her as she lay down, her eyes slowly drifting shut. "Good night, Sayori," he whispered. She mumbled softly, almost asleep. "Good night, and thank you, Casper, for making me feel like I'm not alone." Soon after, she drifted into sleep, her breathing deep and peaceful. Her warmth filled the entire pillow, and Casper could hear her heart beating behind the mighty walls of her body. And even though the darkness outside was heavy, the night no longer felt like a threat, but like a place where two souls had found each other in the quiet. Chapter 10, The Message in the Dream. Casper lay on the soft fabric of Sayori's pillow, her calm breathing rising and falling beside him like the tide. He closed his eyes, but sleep brought him no peace. He saw himself back in front of his computer. The screen glowed in a dark room, and his fingers moved almost automatically over the mouse. On the desktop was an icon for a game he had never seen before. No title, no description. Still, he clicked. A click. A wave of warmth shot through his body. The screen flashed white and a message appeared. You are trapped now. The only way out is to help the girl feel better about herself, but you must not tell anyone. The words flickered, as if written with light burning into his mind. Then, darkness. A fall with no end. His name echoed somewhere far away. Casper. Casper. He woke with a jolt. His eyes opened, and the first thing he saw was Sayori's face. She was still asleep, but the morning sun had begun to slip through the curtains, lighting up her cheeks. She looked so peaceful, her lips curling into the faintest dream smile. For a moment, he forgot everything else, forgot the fear, forgot the mystery, and saw only a beautiful, mighty girl, unknowingly carrying his tiny world with her. Was the dream really just a fantasy, or a message? He couldn't know. But now he remembered a little more. His room. The feeling of loneliness at his computer, and how he had always dreamed of something more, something bigger. Now he was here. He was about to think further, but a movement drew him back. Sayori's eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened. Her blue eyes found his, tired but instantly alive when she saw him. Good morning, little friend, she said, her voice still thick with sleep. She rubbed her eyes, stretched, and her smile broke through, warm and genuine. I almost forgot you'd be here when I woke up. It feels cozy. Casper nodded quietly, smiling back without mentioning the dream. Now he carried a secret, a task he couldn't share. Come on, she said, getting up and scooping him into her hands. Let's have some breakfast. She carried him to the kitchen, setting him gently on the table while she stirred oatmeal in a pot. The scent filled the room, and Casper felt how her everyday life pulled him into a rhythm he could hold on to. She set aside little pieces of fruit for him, set to hide, just like the night before. There, she said, pulling her plate toward herself and placing his portion in front of him. It almost feels like having a tiny roommate. She giggled, her eyes sparkling at him. They ate together calmly as the light grew outside, and when she put down her fork, she stood up with a determined smile. There's something I want to show you today, Casper, she said. My club, my friends. I think you'll like them. His heart pounded. The club? The friends she'd spoken of so warmly. Yuri, Natsuki, Monika. He remembered the words from his dream, helped the girl feel better about herself. And now it felt like the start of something bigger. Sayori grabbed her bag, slipped on her shoes, and lifted him onto her shoulder, where he could see the world from her height. She straightened up, the sun dancing in her hair. All set, she said cheerfully. Let's go to school. I want you to meet them. Casper looked down from her shoulder, watching the street stretch out before them. He still felt nervous, still afraid, but now he also had a spark of purpose and a secret knowledge he had to carry alone. Chapter 11, The School's Threshold. The air outside was fresh and cool, morning dew still clinging to the grass along the road. Sayori pulled her jacket closer around herself and cast a small smile down toward Casper, who sat safely in her jacket pocket. From his perspective, the fabric was like a vast canvas, and the opening up toward her face was a window to the sky. You okay in there? She asked softly, her voice a gentle melody meant only for him. Casper looked up and nodded. It's fine. I almost feel safe, like I'm hidden in a little cave. She giggled, that characteristic light laugh, but her eyes were tender. Good. I don't want anyone to see you yet. Not until I know how to explain it. She looked down the road, fell quiet for a moment, and maybe it's also because I'm still trying to understand it myself. Casper shifted in the pocket so he could see her profile. I've been thinking about what we talked about yesterday, he said carefully. It takes courage to say how you really feel, to show your weaknesses, but I think you can do it. I think your friends will understand more than you expect. Sayori bit her lip, a distant expression flickering across her face. Do you really think so? That they wouldn't See me differently? I think they'll see you more as who you truly are, Casper answered calmly, and that's not a bad thing. She took a deep breath and nodded slowly. Maybe you're right. I've always been so afraid to let it out. But when I see how small you are and how you still dare to say these things, it makes me think maybe I can too. Casper smiled faintly, his heart beating with a strange kind of pride. To be so small, yet give her strength, that was more than he had dared hope for. They continued through the streets, past neighbors and school children, none aware of the secret Sayori carried in her pocket. Soon the school building loomed ahead, tall and lined with windows glinting in the morning sun. Here we are, she whispered, as if sharing the secret only with him. She walked through the doors, down the hallways, while backpacks clinked and voices buzzed all around them. Casper heard the sounds as echoes, everything larger and louder, yet he felt comforted by the rhythm of her steps. At last, Sayori opened a door to a classroom, the literature club. Inside, 3 girls were already busy. Yuri stood by a desk, flipping through a book, her dark purple hair falling like a curtain over her shoulders. Natsuki crouched by a box of papers and magazines, muttering to herself as she rummaged through them. Monika stood at the board, writing notes with a marker, her long hair catching the light from the window. Sayori stepped in, the door closing softly behind her. Immediately, the other girls looked up. "Good morning, Sayori," Monika said with a smile, her voice clear and full of energy. "We were just getting ready. I'm glad you came early." "Yeah, you're usually the last one," Natsuki teased, though there was a spark of warmth in her tone. Sayori laughed nervously, but her gaze flickered briefly down toward the pocket where Casper was hidden. She knew she would soon have to make a decision. When and how she would open up. Casper felt her hand slip gently into the pocket, as if seeking comfort in knowing he was there. And even though he was so small, he felt he could give her the strength she needed in this moment. Chapter 12. When Words Find Their Way. The literature club's room hummed with small sounds. Natsuki lining up books across a desk, Yuri breathing heavily as she turned the pages of a poetry collection, Monika's marker scratching notes onto the board. Sayori closed the door behind her, her smile a little nervous. Inside her jacket pocket, close to her heart, Casper could feel her pulse racing. He sensed she was gathering courage. "Good morning," Sayori said, maybe a little too brightly. She dropped her bag beside a chair, but her hands trembled slightly. "Good morning, Sayori," Yuri replied without fully lifting her head, her voice soft but subdued. She seemed lost in her book's world, but her eyes flicked briefly toward her friend with a faint warmth. "Finally," Natsuki said with a crooked grin. She stood with her hands on her hips, a manga tucked under her arm. "I thought you'd forgotten us again. You're always so unpredictable." Her words were sharp, but the undertone was relief. Monika turned from the board, smiling brightly, her usual leader's energy in her voice. "We're glad you're here, Sayori. It always feels a little empty without you." Sayori's smile wavered, but held. Her hand slipped into her pocket, gently squeezing the fabric near where Casper sat. She took a deep breath. Girls," she began, her voice tentative, "there's something I maybe want to share." All 3 froze. Yuri slowly lifted her gaze from her book, Natsuki raised an eyebrow, and Monika stepped closer, attentive. Sayori bit her lip. She could feel Casper's presence like a tiny, hidden strength. "I can do this," she thought. "I know I always seem happy," she said slowly, haltingly. "I joke, I make you laugh, and I do love that." But she lowered her eyes, her shoulders beginning to shake. "That's not always how I feel inside." Yuri blinked, her expression softening, like a flame dimmed by the wind. "Sayori!" she murmured quietly, but didn't interrupt. Natsuki looked away for a second, her fingers tightening around the book in her hands. "That's not easy to say," she muttered quickly, maybe a bit harsher than she meant, though her voice quivered faintly. Monika took a step closer, her gaze warm but serious. "That's brave of you to say, Sayori. We're here for you, no matter what." Sayori's breath quickened as if she feared she'd break down, but she forced the words forward. "Sometimes it feels like I'm only sunshine for you all, like I'm only fun to be with when I'm smiling, but when I'm alone, it gets so much heavier." For a moment, the room was silent. Yuri slowly closed her book and placed it on the desk, her hands folding nervously. I know that feeling, she said softly, almost like a confession. Hiding behind books because it's easier than letting people see the darkness inside. She blushed instantly, but her eyes were honest. Natsuki made a face, but her voice had lost its hard edge. Sayori, you're not just fun to be around because you're happy. You matter to us, even when you're dumb, silly, or sad. Got it? She quickly turned her head, as if the words were too heavy to hold. Monica knelt down so she was at eye level with Sayori. I mean it, Sayori. We don't want you to wear a mask all the time. Your feelings are just as valuable as your smiles. We're your friends, and we love you as you are. Sayori gasped softly, tears pushing forward, but she smiled through them. Really? You mean it? Yuri nodded firmly. Yes, Natsuki scoffed, blushing. Of course. Monica placed a hand on her arm. Always. Casper could feel Sayori's hand press against her pocket, close to him. He heard her heartbeat quicken, but now not from fear, but from relief. For the first time in a long while, she felt that the words she'd kept hidden inside had finally been heard. Chapter 13, The Revelation. The room felt different after Sayori's words. The atmosphere, once a mix of chatter and preparation, was now quiet, close, almost sacred. The three girls had each reacted differently, but all sincerely. Yuri with soft sensitivity, Natsuki with sharp but genuine warmth, and Monica with calm support. And Sayori herself, she sat with tears still on her cheeks, but also with a smile more genuine than anything she had shown in a long time. She wiped her eyes with her sleeve and gave a nervous laugh. I was so scared you wouldn't like me anymore if I said it out loud, that I'd scare you away. You could never scare us away, Sayori, Monika said at once, her voice clear as a promise. Idiot, Natsuki muttered, cheeks red. As if we'd just leave, just because you're honest. She turned her gaze away quickly, but it was obvious she meant every word. Yuri folded her hands, her fingers trembling slightly, but her eyes softened as they rested on Sayori. I think what you said was beautiful and brave. Sayori smiled, a blush spreading across her cheeks. She looked down at her lap, inhaling as if she were gathering new courage. There's actually something more. All three turned their attention to her, tense and curious. Sayori's fingers tugged nervously at the hem of her jacket. I wouldn't have dared say any of this if it weren't for someone I met yesterday. A young man. She giggled suddenly, nervously, as if she herself thought it sounded ridiculous. He helped me find the courage to open up. A collective gasp swept through the room. What? Natsuki slapped her hands on the desk, eyes wide. A who? Yuri froze, a faint flush spreading across her pale cheeks. A young man? Yesterday? She looked bewildered, as though trying to piece together how that could possibly make sense. Monika's eyebrows shot up, though her voice stayed calm. That's unexpected, Sayori. You never talk about boys. Sayori laughed nervously again, her hands rising to her cheeks, now burning bright red. Hey, I know, it's kind of embarrassing, but he's actually here. Silence. The three girls stared at her as if she had just claimed a dragon was hiding in the room. What do you mean? Here. Yuri asked softly, her voice so low it nearly vanished. Natsuki flung out her arms, glancing wildly around the room. Have you gone crazy, Sayori? I don't see anyone. She got up from her chair, pacing a few steps as if expecting some guy to suddenly jump out from behind the curtains. Monika narrowed her eyes, calm but tinged with suspicion. If he's here, Sayori, why don't we see him? Sayori pressed her lips together, her gaze darting between her friends. She looked like someone standing on the edge of a revelation that could change everything. And in her pocket, Casper could feel her hand closing gently around him, as if drawing courage from the tiny presence of his body. Chapter 14, The Revelation on the Table. Sayori's fingers trembled slightly as she slipped her hand into her pocket. She felt the tiny figure pressing against the fabric. Casper, like a beating heart she held close to her own. Her three friends were already staring at her, each in their own way. Natsuki, eyebrows raised, mouth half open in a mix of irritation and curiosity. Yuri, hands folded nervously at her chest, eyes wide and cheeks faintly flushed. Monika, upright and calm, but with razor-sharp focus in her gaze. Okay, girls. Sayori's voice shook, though a smile tugged at her lips. I want to show you something, and you have to promise not to panic. She opened her hand and gently placed Casper in the middle of the table. For Casper, it felt like being set on a stage. The wood beneath his feet was cold and smooth, and before him the three girls loomed like giants, their eyes locked onto him. There was a moment of silence. Then came the reactions. What? Natsuki slammed her palms on the table so hard Casper had to fight to keep his balance. Is that a tiny guy? Like a living action figure? She leaned in close, her eyes huge, but stopped herself, as if afraid to touch him. Yuri gasped sharply, pressing her hands against her mouth. It can't be. He's real? She moved forward slowly, almost like a cat approaching something fragile. Her eyes shone with a strange mix of horror and fascination. Monica said nothing at first. She just watched. Her gaze was intense, probing, like a leader trying to understand before making a move. Then she slowly leaned down, tilting her head slightly. So, this is him, Sayori? Sayori nodded eagerly, her cheeks still glowing red. She sat down again, folding her hands and looking at Casper with a tender smile. This is Casper, she said, her voice trembling between pride and nerves. I found him yesterday, on the street. He was all alone, so small I could hardly believe my eyes. He told me he only remembers his name and that he was playing a game before ending up here. The three girls now stood closer, towering over him like massive pillars. Natsuki narrowed her eyes, pointing toward him but stopping her finger just short of the surface, as if she didn't dare touch. And you're saying he's real? Not some kind of trick? Yuri leaned further forward, her purple hair falling like a curtain toward the tabletop. She whispered, almost reverently, He's moving, he's breathing, he's real. Monica placed her hands on the table, leaning slightly forward as her eyes calmly swept over Casper. That explains why you were suddenly so honest today, Sayori, she said softly. He gave you the courage. Sayori nodded, her smile now more genuine. Yes. Casper, he made me say it out loud. If it hadn't been for him, I never would have dared. Casper stood still, his heart pounding as the three enormous girls gazed at him from every angle. He had never felt so small, yet, for the first time, not alone. Chapter 15. The Questions. Casper stood in the middle of the table, surrounded by three faces so large their breaths felt like gusts of wind. Sayori sat just behind him, her hands clasped tightly, as if she were both proud and nervous at the same time. So, Casper, Natsuki began quickly, her voice sharp and loud. She leaned in so close her eyes filled his entire view. How can you even be that small? Are you some kind of experiment? A mistake? Casper opened his mouth, then closed it again. Words fumbled inside him, but all he could manage was, I don't know. I only remember fragments, my name, sitting at my computer, and then all of this. Yuri placed a hand against her lips, her eyes trembling. Incredible. To wake up and suddenly be trapped in a world where everything is 1,000 times bigger. How could you possibly even? She trailed off, blushing as she pulled back, as if she had said too much. But seriously, Natsuki cut in, slapping her palm on the table so hard Casper had to steady himself. If you don't even remember who you are, how are we supposed to trust you? What if you're dangerous? Casper felt his heart hammering, his tiny body shaking under the weight of their questions. I'm not dangerous, he said, though his voice cracked. I don't know why this happened. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Hey! Monica's voice sliced through the tension. She stepped closer and held up a hand toward Natsuki in a stopping gesture. Give him some space. Can't you see he's overwhelmed? I was just asking, Natsuki muttered, but she leaned back with her arms crossed, cheeks tinged red. Monica looked down at Casper, her expression softening. It's okay if you don't have all the answers right now. We'll figure it out together. Right, girls? Yuri nodded at once, folding her hands in front of her. Yes, of course. Natsuki rolled her eyes but muttered, Fine, whatever. Sayori placed her hand close to Casper on the table, as if to show he already had an ally. He's already helped me. That should be enough for you to see he's not an enemy. Casper took a deep breath, his shoulders easing slightly. Monica's words had given him a measure of calm. The club meeting gradually slipped back into a more normal rhythm. Books were laid out, paper and pencils handed around, and the girls sat down while Casper was placed atop a notebook, giving him a better view. We're reading poems today, Monica said with her usual smile. Would you like to join us, Casper? Casper hesitated. He glanced down at the massive pages, the text looming like walls of ink. I can read, but I get tired quickly. The letters feel so big and heavy, like they're crashing down on me. The room went quiet. Yuri looked at him with pure understanding. Natsuki stared, surprised, but kept silent. But, Casper added, a little more confidently, I love listening. I use audiobooks. I can listen for hours. So if you read aloud, I promise I'll take in every word. Sayori smiled warmly. That's perfect. We can read for you, Casper, and then you can tell us how it makes you feel. Monica nodded, her eyes brightening with inspiration. That actually makes a lot of sense. Literature isn't just about reading. It's about hearing, sharing, and feeling. Casper sat down, letting the calm wash over him. For the first time, he didn't feel like just a stranger in the club, but part of it. Chapter 16, Voices in the Room. Paper rustled, pencils were set aside, and a strange layer of tense but gentle quiet settled over the clubroom. Casper sat on an open notebook in the middle of the table, its pages like wide floors beneath him. Above him, the three girls stood like towers, each holding a sheet of paper. Sayori sat at his side like a protector, her smile encouraging. We usually read our poems out loud for each other, Monica explained in her calm, leader's voice. Maybe you can listen too, Casper. It's a little piece of our hearts we share here. Casper nodded softly. I'd love to hear them, he said. I love listening to words. They're beautiful. Yuri went first. She lifted the paper with her long, delicate fingers, and her voice came low and melodic, almost like hearing water dripping through a cavern. Her words flowed slowly, about a lonely lighthouse keeper and a dark harbor. Casper closed his eyes, letting her tone wash over him. Even in his tiny body, goosebumps rose along his arms. I've never heard poetry like this before, he thought, like a song filling the whole air. When she finished, Yuri lowered her gaze, blushing as she pulled the page back toward her. It was just something I wrote yesterday, she murmured. It was beautiful, Casper said honestly, looking up at her. She blinked in surprise, but his words brought the faintest, unexpected smile to her lips. Natsuki huffed, pushing back her chair a little. Okay, guess it's my turn then. She held up her small notebook and began reading. Her voice was quicker, sharper, but alive. Her words about determination, cupcakes, and finding strength in small things came in short bursts like drum beats. Casper followed along, letting the rhythm fill him. I really like it, he said once she finished. It's different, but it feels strong. Natsuki looked away quickly, a blush creeping across her cheeks. Really? A guy like you. I mean, you look like someone who'd only listen to, audiobooks about swords and dragons. She shrugged, but her eyes flicked back at him for just a moment, as if she couldn't hide a tiny smile. Casper chuckled softly. I actually listen to all kinds of things. Fantasy, history, poetry. When someone reads aloud, I can see pictures in the words. It's easier than reading myself. I get tired fast. But the sound, it stays with me. The room grew quiet for a beat, and Natsuki muttered something under her breath, but her shoulders eased. I guess that's kind of okay. Monica went last. She stepped forward, her paper steady in her hand. Her voice was clear, strong yet warm, and her poem spoke of new beginnings, of daring to look yourself in the eye even when it's hard. Casper looked up, caught in the energy she carried through her words. He felt something stir in his chest, a faint echo of the dream's message. Help the girl feel better about herself. When Monica finished, she didn't speak right away. Instead, she looked at Casper, then at Sayori sitting beside him. It's the first time we've had someone listening who isn't our size, she said with a small smile, and it actually felt good. Casper sat still, letting the words of all three girls linger in the air. Thank you, all of you, he said at last. It was beautiful. It feels like I can sense who you are through what you read. Sayori brushed a fingertip gently across the edge of the table near him, her eyes shimmering. We're glad you're here, Casper. I think it was important for the girls to see that you just listen. You're not a threat. Yuri gave the faintest nod. Natsuki shrugged, but allowed a quick smile. Monica leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful, almost as if she were already forming a plan. The clubroom no longer felt like a foreign place. It was filled with voices, and for the first time, Casper felt like he was in the middle of something he had always dreamed of. Words, warmth, and people who might truly understand him. Chapter 17, The Drawing. The sun was already hanging low outside, and the school hallways were nearly empty. The literature club's room lay quiet, papers scattered across the table, half-open books, pencils left behind. It had been a long day. Readings, laughter, small discussions, and Casper felt both tired and uplifted. He sat on the edge of Sayori's notebook, watching her as she stacked papers into neat piles. Sayori, he began hesitantly, do you think it would be okay if I tried going home with one of the other girls? Just for the weekend. Maybe I could get to know them better, the way I've gotten to know you. She stopped, blinked once, then her face lit up in a wide smile. That's actually a great idea. You've already helped me so much. Maybe you could do the same for them. She sat down, rested her chin in her hands, and looked at him dreamily. But how should we decide who you go with? Casper shrugged. We could make it a kind of drawing, just for fun. Sayori's eyes immediately sparkled. Oh, yes! A game! She giggled, already caught up in the idea. We'll write your name on 3 pieces of paper, and then we each draw one. Whoever gets your name takes you home for the weekend. Her laughter bubbled over, and Casper couldn't help but smile. It felt both silly and exciting. Monica, who had been at the board packing up her things, turned with a sly smile. That actually sounds pretty fair, Sayori, and it makes it an experience for all of you. She pulled out 3 blank slips of paper, folded them into small squares, and wrote in her neat, elegant script, Casper on each one. She placed them on the table and slid them toward Sayori. Mix them well. Sayori nodded solemnly, like a judge in an important contest. She shuffled the papers around, giggling the whole time, then stacked them in a small pile in the middle of the table. Okay, girls, ready? Yuri sat upright, smiling nervously, her fingers twisting at a lock of hair. I'm not sure I'm ready for that responsibility. Natsuki, on the other hand, scoffed, crossing her arms and looking away. Like I even care. But fine, let's just get this over with. Then choose, Monica said with a grin. She took one slip herself, Yuri hesitantly picked another, and Natsuki reached out irritably for the last. For a moment, the room was still. Then they slowly unfolded their papers. Monica smiled, closed hers again. Not me. Yuri flushed faintly, glancing down. Not me either. All eyes turned to Natsuki. She stared at the tiny slip in her hand, her eyes going wide as her cheeks burned scarlet. What? She smacked her hand against the table, but the way her ears glowed red betrayed her completely. It's just random. Nothing special. Sayori burst into giggles, clutching her stomach. Natsuki, you're blushing so much. I am not. Natsuki shoved her chair back and turned her face away, but the crimson in her cheeks betrayed her. Casper stood on the table, feeling his stomach drop. He was going home with her. The most skeptical of the girls, the one who had been most mistrustful, was now going to host him for 2 whole days. Monica nodded with satisfaction, like a judge delivering a verdict. Then it's settled. Casper will stay with Natsuki from Friday to Sunday. Yuri gave him a small, gentle smile. I hope it goes well for you both. Natsuki growled under her breath, hiding behind the book she had left on the table. Like I even need him. But fine, just don't get in my way, okay? Casper nodded quietly, though inside he felt both nervous and excited. A new weekend, a new secret, a new chance to understand not only the girls, but himself. Chapter 18, The Pocket in Her Jacket. The clubroom was empty as Natsuki pulled her jacket over her shoulders. The other girls had already left, and only Sayori had given Casper an encouraging glance before letting Natsuki take him along. Come on, little guy, Natsuki said quickly, without looking directly at him. She held out her hand, and when Casper stepped into her warm palm, he felt a faint, nervous tremble in her fingers. She immediately slipped him down into her jacket pocket, as if to hide the fact that she had blushed. Just stay still in there, she muttered, buttoning her jacket halfway. I don't want people staring at me because I'm talking to my pocket. Casper settled himself among the folds of fabric. I can't promise it'll look completely normal, he said with a small smile. She sniffed, a faint giggle hidden in her tone. Ch-ch, you're annoying. But, yeah, maybe you're right. They walked through the quiet streets. Each of her steps sent soft tremors through the fabric, enclosing him like a warm little cave. He could hear her breathing close by, a bit faster than normal, as though she were trying to keep up a facade. After a few minutes of silence, Casper spoke calmly. You seem like this is hard for you, having me with you. She rolled her shoulders, her voice sharp but slightly unsteady. It's just weird, okay? Suddenly, I have to bring a strange guy home, A guy small enough to fit inside a teacup. How do you think that feels? Overwhelming, Casper said softly. She was quiet for a moment. Yeah, exactly. But don't think that means I'm weak or anything. I can handle it. I always handle things on my own. Casper leaned against the edge of the pocket so he could see a little of her face. Her cheeks were red from the cold, or maybe from something else. It doesn't make you less strong to admit it's hard. I can tell you're trying to sound tough, but I think you're more caring than you let on. Natsuki stopped in the middle of the street, as if the words had struck her. She exhaled, rolled her eyes, and started walking again. You don't know me, Casper. I am tough. If I'm not, people walk all over me. That's just how it is. But even through her words, Casper could sense the opposite. Every time she held her hand closer to her pocket, every time her pace slowed slightly as if to keep him safe, it gave her away. Soon they reached a small, modest house. She unlocked the door, stepped inside, and kicked off her shoes in the entryway. So, welcome, she said, and this time her voice wasn't hard, but more like an admission. It's not a palace, but it's my home. She carefully pulled him out of her pocket and placed him on a low table in the living room. Her eyes darted nervously, and she crossed her arms. So, what do you think? Casper looked around. Small shelves stacked with manga, posters on the walls, a sofa that looked worn but cozy. It wasn't big, but it was warm. I think it's cozy. It feels like a place that's completely yours. Natsuki blushed again, quickly pulling a face. You're just being polite, but thanks, I guess. And in that moment, Casper knew that behind the tough tone there was something much softer. Something she only showed when she felt safe. Chapter 19, The Scent of Cupcakes. They stepped into the kitchen, and immediately Casper was hit by a sweet fragrance that nearly knocked the breath from him. It was warm, rich, a blend of sugar, vanilla, and butter dancing in the air. From his place in Natsuki's hand, he could see a tray on the counter, where a few freshly baked cupcakes still steamed gently. Wow, he whispered, almost breathless. That smells amazing. You bake cupcakes? Natsuki instantly tilted her chin up, crossing her arms and trying to hide the little smile pressing at her lips. Of course I do. It's my specialty. I could bake cupcakes in my sleep if I wanted to. A faint blush crept across her face, though she tried to sound tough. Casper looked up at her with a small smile. So, maybe I could help? You know, as much as I can at my size. Natsuki's eyes widened, and she froze for a second. Help? Her face flushed bright red, and she turned away, mumbling, That's not really something a guy like you should be doing. She paused, took a deep breath, and then blurted out quickly, But if you really want to, I guess I can think of something. She carefully set Casper down on the counter beside a bag of sugar and a stick of butter. From his perspective, they towered like mountains, but the smell was so strong it almost made him dizzy. Okay, she said, cheeks still red. You can, help stir the flour. I'll find you a little spoon. She rummaged through a drawer and placed a teaspoon in front of him, which to him looked more like a shovel. Casper grabbed the handle with both hands, dragging it slowly across the counter. I'll do my best. Natsuki giggled, a sound she quickly covered with a fake cough. Heh, you look ridiculous with that spoon, but it's kind of cute. She poured a small pile of flour in front of him, like a little mound of snow. So, just stir this around. I'll handle the real batch, and you can play with your little corner. Casper got to work, shoveling the flour around with a focused expression. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Natsuki watching him, a small smile tugging at her lips even as she tried to roll her eyes. You're actually taking this seriously, she said, planting her hands on her hips. I thought you'd give up right away. But maybe you're not as useless as I thought. Casper chuckled. That might be the nicest thing you've said to me so far. Natsuki snapped back instantly. Shh! I didn't say anything nice. I just said you're not completely hopeless. Her cheeks burned red, but she couldn't stop the smile from breaking through. In the scent of vanilla and sugar, between his tiny scoops and her stubborn attempts to hide her joy, the moment felt almost magical. For the first time that day, Casper saw that behind her tough facade was a girl who actually enjoyed having him there. Chapter 20, Behind the Facade. The scent of freshly baked cupcakes filled the kitchen. Bowls were scattered across the counter, a dusting of flour like snow over the wood, and in the middle of it all stood Casper, still wrestling with the oversized spoon. Natsuki leaned against the counter, arms still crossed, but this time there was little hardness in her gaze. She giggled, a light, genuine laugh, as she watched his struggle. "You look like a tiny miner," she said, not even trying to hide her grin. "I should give you a little helmet and a lamp for your head." Casper stuck the spoon into the mound of flour and exhaled dramatically. "It's hard work in the cupcake mines." Her giggle burst into laughter, her cheeks warming, this time from amusement rather than embarrassment. Okay, that one was actually pretty good." She reached for the bowl of butter, her hands moving quickly. Practiced. "I don't know why, but I love baking. It feels like everything gets a little easier when I do it." She paused, staring at the butter as if searching for words. "When things are tough, at least there's one thing I can control. Sugar, flour, butter, they do what I want. And in the end, I get something sweet." Casper looked up at her, sensing her mask slipping. "It sounds like a place where you feel safe." She bit her lip briefly, then nodded. "Yeah, it is." Then she lifted her head, a small smile curling at the corner of her lips. "But I don't share it with just anyone. This is special." She pointed teasingly at him, blush returning to her cheeks. "So you should actually feel pretty lucky, Casper. Not everyone gets to help me." He chuckled softly. "I'm honored. I might be the smallest helper you've ever had." She laughed, a bright, honest sound that lit up the room. "The smallest? Try. The most troublesome. But maybe also the funniest." Scooping a dab of frosting with her fingertip, she carefully held it down to him. "Want to taste? Then you can tell me if you're even qualified to be in my kitchen." Casper nodded and sampled the sweet cream, his eyes lighting up. "That's really good." Natsuki narrowed her eyes and nodded smugly, though her smile was softer than she'd admit. "Of course it is. I told you, I'm good at this." They continued side by side, the tiny helper and the stubborn girl who, for the first time, let her mask slip and showed she actually enjoyed the company. And in the fragrance of sugar and laughter, the kitchen no longer felt like just a room, but a place where two very different worlds could meet. Chapter 21, A Picture on the Shelf. The kitchen was quiet now, save for the small sounds of forks and plates. The table was set simply, a bowl with leftover frosting, a plate of freshly baked cupcakes, and a jug of water. For Casper, it felt absurd and charming to sit at a table where dinner was essentially cake. "So," Natsuki said, half a bite still in her mouth, "if you tell anyone I served cupcakes for dinner, then—" She shook her finger threateningly, though the blush in her cheeks betrayed that she wasn't serious. Casper chuckled. "Secret, I promise." She exhaled and leaned back a little, satisfied. "Good." That was when his eyes caught something. On a shelf, just to the right of the table, stood a small picture frame. The glass caught the lamplight, and behind it was a photograph. A younger Natsuki, smiling in a way different from now, standing beside an older man. Her hand was in his, but her eyes held a mix of joy and something else, something Casper couldn't place. He hesitated, but curiosity burned. "Natsuki? Who's that in the picture?" She froze instantly. The hand holding her cupcake trembled, and she quickly set it down on the plate. It's not important," she said too quickly, too sharply. Her eyes flicked toward the shelf, and she rushed to take the picture down. She turned it over, leaving only the back facing out. Casper felt the heaviness in the air. "It seems important. You look different in that picture. Happy, but also a little—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Vulnerable." "Stop." Natsuki's voice cracked slightly, though she tried to harden it. "It's not something I want to talk about." She sat back down, arms crossed tight over her chest, cheeks burning, not with anger but panic. Casper looked up at her, sensing how fragile her facade suddenly felt. "That's okay. You don't have to say anything now," he said gently. "But you should know I'm here, just like I was for Sayori. You don't have to carry it alone." Her eyes flicked to him, quick, intense, then away again. She bit her lip and drummed her fingers against the table. "You're so annoying," she muttered quietly. "Always so calm, always so understanding. I hate it." But her voice was softer than before, and behind her crossed arms, Casper could see the faint tremor in her shoulders. They sat in silence for a while, the lamp casting gentle shadows across the wall. Natsuki took a deep breath, but said nothing more. Not yet. Chapter 22, When Memories Flood In. The kitchen was quiet now. The lamp above the table hummed faintly, and the half-eaten cupcakes sat between them like little sweet islands in an otherwise heavy atmosphere. Casper sat on the tabletop, and Natsuki had her arms crossed, gaze turned away from the photo she had just flipped over. A long time passed before she spoke. "That was my dad," she mumbled at last, barely audible. Casper looked up, sensing how the words dragged out of her. "Your dad?" She nodded stiffly, her eyes darting. He's not exactly nice. Not ever." She bit her lip, paused, then gave a short, bitter snort meant to sound tough, but it only betrayed the tremble in her voice. "Actually, he's never nice." She stood abruptly, walked to the sink, and grabbed a cup, but her hands shook so badly she set it down again without filling it. "He gets mad over the smallest things. If I spend too much time on manga, if I bake, if I just exist, he yells. And sometimes—" She stopped, her eyes glassy. "Sometimes it's worse than yelling." A chill ran through Casper. He said nothing, but his gaze hardened, attentive. Natsuki returned to the table, dropping into the chair, her shoulders sagging. "My mom, she died when I was younger. I can't even remember everything about her anymore, just that she always smelled like tea and cakes. I think that's why I love baking. When I bake, it feels like she's here for a moment." She buried her face in her hands, words muffled. "But him, he hates it. He says it's a waste of money. He takes it from me, throws it away, like he's trying to erase the last piece of her I have." Casper walked closer, as far as his tiny legs could carry him, and stood in front of her hands. "Natsuki," he said softly. She shook her head, gave a nervous laugh that cracked halfway through. "I wish I could be as strong as I try to look. But the truth is, I just feel small all the time. Not just because I'm short, but because I've never had the power to change anything. And now here I am, telling you everything, like you could fix it." Her hands slid down from her face, and Casper could see the tears pressing at her eyes, even as she fought them back. She clenched her fists, but her voice broke. "I hate him, Casper, and I hate that I'm still afraid of him. I hate that I miss my mom so much it hurts just to think about her." Casper spoke quietly. "It doesn't make you weak to say that. It makes you honest." She stared at him, and for a second it looked like she might snap at him. But then the dam broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she covered her face again, this time with no facade. A sob tore from her chest, shaking her whole body, and she bent forward until her forehead nearly touched the table. Casper placed his tiny hand against her finger resting nearby. He could feel her skin trembling under his touch. "You're not alone anymore," he said firmly. "I'm here, and I'm staying." She whimpered, tried to form words, but they drowned in her sobbing. Instead, she let her hand fall around him, not tight, but secure enough to hold him close against her warm palm. She kept him there, like a small anchor in the storm, while she cried, long and raw, but true. And when the tears finally ebbed, the air in the room had changed. Her facade lay shattered behind her, and what remained was just Natsuki, not the tough girl, not the sharp tongue, but the real her. Chapter 23, A Quiet Night. The kitchen was quiet again, broken only by the sound of Natsuki's sniffles. She still held Casper in her hands, her cheeks damp with tears, her eyes red and glassy. Her shoulders sagged, her whole body heavy, as if she had carried a burden for years and finally let go of it for a moment. Casper pressed his tiny hand against her skin, his voice steady and calm. "Natsuki, your dad can't hurt you now. You're here, away from him, and you have something he can never take from you." She blinked, looking at him with tired eyes. "And what would that be?" "Your friends," Casper said without hesitation. "Sayori, Yuri, Monica. They love you. They care about you. Not for who you pretend to be, but for who you are. And I care about you too. For all of you. Even the side you hide." Natsuki stared at him as if she didn't know how to accept the words. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, letting out only a shaky breath. She turned her face away, a blush mingling with the exhaustion on her features. "I'm not used to anyone saying things like that," she murmured. "I'm used to having to fight for everything, to be heard, to keep what I love, just to be me." Casper shook his head, smiling faintly. "Here, you don't have to fight, not all the time. Here, you can just be Natsuki." She let the silence stretch, and slowly her shoulders began to ease. She lifted him carefully, setting him on the chest of her sweatshirt, just beneath her chin, where she could feel his tiny weight. "You're really weird," she said with a tired but genuine laugh. So small, but you talk like you could hold up the whole world. Casper chuckled softly. Maybe I can't hold the whole world, but I can hold you up. Just a little. She leaned back into the sofa, pulling a blanket over herself, still keeping him resting close against her. Her eyes drifted halfway shut, her voice only a murmur. Maybe I'm not as alone as I thought. Casper settled against her, making sure she could feel his presence. You're not alone. Not anymore. A faint smile curved her lips. She let out a long sigh, heavy with exhaustion, but edged with relief. And soon after, she slipped into a quiet sleep, his tiny form an anchor against the darkness. For the first time in a long time, Natsuki slept without feeling completely alone. Chapter 24. 2 Beds and a Choice. After the long day, they moved into her room. It was small, but it carried Natsuki's mark everywhere. Shelves crammed with manga, colorful posters covering the walls, and on the windowsill a mug of pencils, with a little figurine of a cartoon girl stuck in among them. On the nightstand, she had prepared something for him, a little box lined with a folded napkin as a mattress, and on top a scrap of fabric cut into a blanket. She stood with her arms crossed, cheeks faintly red. There, she said quickly, your bed. I made it, not because I care, but because you just complain otherwise. Casper looked at the tiny bed, his heart warming. It's perfect. You really thought of everything. She snorted, her eyes sliding away as if she couldn't hold his gaze. Yeah. Just go to sleep already. She turned to climb onto her own bed, but stopped halfway, an odd unease in her movements. Sitting down on the edge, she bent her head, hair falling like a curtain around her face. She began, her voice softer than usual. It's dumb to ask, but maybe. She bit her lip, the blush spreading to her ears. Maybe you'd rather sleep here. She patted gently on the pillow beside her. Next to me, just so I don't feel so alone. Casper froze, not in fear, but in surprise. To hear those words from Natsuki, the one who always hid her vulnerability behind sharp words, made it clear how much courage it had taken her. He smiled gently. If you want me close, then I'd like that. She immediately averted her gaze, as if regretting saying it. Shh, forget it. But fine, only for tonight, and don't read anything into it, got it? Casper chuckled softly. Got it. She lay down, pulled the blanket up to her chin, and carefully placed him beside her shoulder on the pillow. From his perspective, her face was enormous, yet soft, her lashes casting little shadows across her cheeks. She sighed quietly, her breathing slowly evening out. It's stupid, but it feels kind of safe, she murmured, just before sleep took her. Casper looked up at her, feeling her warmth so near, and understood that behind the tough facade she had finally shown him the side of herself she always kept hidden. Chapter 25. The night's secret night draped the house in stillness. The curtains were drawn, but a faint glow from the street lamp outside painted a pale stripe across the floor. Natsuki lay on her side, the blanket pulled up to her shoulders, and Casper lay near her cheek on the pillow, so close he could almost hear the blood rushing beneath her skin. Her breathing was steady, but sometimes uneasy, as though her dreams turned her restlessly. And then, suddenly, words slipped out, soft, blurred, but clear enough for Casper to hear. Mom, I miss you. She mumbled again, even softer, as if hovering between sleep and tears. Smell of tea, cupcakes. Why did you leave? Casper was silent, his heart tightening at her longing. He had seen her blush, heard her sarcasm, endured her facade, but this was different. This was the deepest, hidden Natsuki, the one she would never dare to reveal awake. He said nothing. He could only press his tiny hand against her skin, a small touch, and hope she could feel that she wasn't entirely alone. Morning crept in slowly. Birds outside began to sing, and light brushed into the room in soft strokes. Natsuki stretched, yawned, and then quickly looked away from Casper, as if suddenly remembering she had let him sleep beside her all night. Good morning, she blurted, cheeks instantly flushed. You didn't snore, so I guess it's fine you slept there. Casper just smiled. Good morning. He said nothing about what he had heard. That was her secret, until she was ready to share it. Together they went into the kitchen, where she quickly set out a simple breakfast. Toast, a glass of juice, and, of course, a cupcake left from the day before. She placed him on the table so he could reach his tiny portion, and sat with her knees pulled up under her on the chair. Casper took a bite of his share and looked up at her. Natsuki, I was wondering, What kind of manga do you read? Her eyes lit up instantly, though she tried to tone it down. Oh, manga? Well, all kinds. I like shoujo, romantic stories, cute stuff, but also slice of life with friendships, and some action now and then. She leaned forward, a little grin tugging at her lips. Why? Are you one of those people who think manga is just for kids? Casper shook his head. No, I asked because I want to hear about what you like. Maybe I can even learn something from it. She blushed, but smiled proudly. Heh? Okay, then I'll introduce you to something decent. But don't think I'll hand you my best series right away. You've got to work your way up. Casper laughed softly. Fair enough. And as she explained eagerly about the first series she'd show him, she forgot for a while the heavy things she carried inside. And Casper, he kept the knight's words in his heart, knowing that someday he would have to talk to her about them. But not yet. Chapter 26, Words and Pictures. Sunlight streamed freely into the kitchen now, and breakfast was nearly gone. Natsuki leaned forward, her eyes shining as she spoke with eager hands. Okay, first you've got to read Parfait Girls. It's cute, funny, a little silly, but it teaches you everything about how a real shoujo manga works. And after that, maybe I'll introduce you to something more serious, like Fruits Basket, or... She stopped abruptly, her gaze flicking toward him as if something had struck her. Oh, I totally forgot you said you're not that great at reading. Casper smiled calmly, shaking his head. It's okay. I can read, I just get tired quickly. But I actually read a whole series once. Her eyebrows rose. Seriously? Which one? Dragon Ball, he said, his voice carrying a mix of pride and nostalgia. When I was younger, I devoured the whole thing. Natsuki's eyes widened, then she burst out laughing, a grin filling the room. Dragon Ball? Of course! Every boy reads Dragon Ball. But, wow, the whole series? That's actually kinda impressive. Casper blushed faintly, but went on. Otherwise, I've watched a lot of anime. Howl's Moving Castle, that one feels magical. I could watch it again and again. Ghost in the Shell, heavier but so beautiful and thought-provoking. He hesitated, then his cheeks warmed. And one I'll never forget is Metropolis from 2001. I remember crying over it. It's so beautiful and so sad at the same time. For a moment, there was silence. Natsuki blinked, her expression softening. She leaned forward, elbow on the table and chin resting in her hand. Metropolis? She said slowly. You cried over an anime? Casper nodded, embarrassed. Yeah, I know it sounds silly, but the music, the images, the story, it just hit me. I couldn't hold the tears back. Natsuki stared at him, and slowly the corner of her mouth curled into a small, warm smile. That's not silly. Not at all. Actually, it's kind of brave to admit. Most people would just pretend they never cry. She looked away, a blush creeping across her cheeks. I've cried over manga before, too, but I'm not telling you which one. Casper chuckled softly. Fair enough, I won't press you. She waved her arms quickly, as if to hide her blush. But hey, that means you can handle a real story. Maybe I should just find something we can read together. Or I could read to you. Then you'd get the whole experience without getting tired. Her gaze returned to him, smiling, though she couldn't hide the little flicker of shyness in her eyes. And you can cry if you want. I promise I won't laugh at you. For Casper, it felt like a new door opening. Not just into her world of manga, but into her heart. Slowly, gently, with a warmth she didn't even realize she was sharing. Chapter 27, Metropolis. After breakfast, they moved into the living room, where Natsuki fussed with her small collection of DVDs and manga. Casper sat on the coffee table, legs dangling over the edge. You mentioned that Metropolis thing, she said, looking down at him with a raised brow. I've never seen it. So, what's so special about it? Casper blushed faintly. It's hard to explain. It's beautiful and tragic. It's not just about robots and technology, but about people. About what it means to be alive. Natsuki looked at him for a long moment, then rolled her eyes and pulled out her laptop. Okay. We'll find it. But if I end up crying, it's your fault. She set the computer on the table, placed a pillow nearby, and set Casper there so he could see the screen. She curled up on the sofa with a blanket over her legs and started the film. From the very first images, the sprawling, colorful city, the jazz tones, the crowds and towering buildings, Natsuki sat frozen, her eyes caught by the screen. Wow, she murmured, almost to herself. It's way prettier than I thought. Casper said nothing. He just watched the film, and her. how her eyes reflected the light, how her hand unconsciously gripped the blanket tighter whenever the scenes grew tense. When the young robot girl Tima first appeared, Natsuki leaned forward, her eyes softening. She seemed so innocent. Casper smiled faintly, but didn't answer. He knew the words would make sense on their own later. As the film went on, the mood grew heavier. The music, the visuals, the story's weight, they all built together, and Casper felt his throat tighten. And when the ending came, when the music swelled and everything fell apart, he couldn't hold it back. Tears slid down his cheeks, small drops landing on the table in front of him. Beside him, Natsuki sat with her hand over her mouth, shoulders trembling. She cried too, quietly at first, then openly. She wiped at her face with her sleeve, but the tears kept coming. "Your fault," she muttered between sniffs, trying to giggle though her voice broke. "I told you." Casper wiped his eyes, smiling through the tears. "I couldn't hold it back either. Not then, not now." She looked at him through blurred eyes, and for a moment there was no facade, no sharp tone. Just a girl and a tiny friend, side by side, connected by a film that had touched them both. As the credits rolled across the screen, she sighed deeply, her gaze lingering on him. That was beautiful and sad. I get it now. Pulling the blanket tighter around herself, her eyes still shining, she smiled softly. Maybe it's not so bad to cry with someone. Casper nodded, brushing away the last of his tears. No, actually it feels pretty right. Chapter 28, Cupcakes and Reflections. The film was over, but its atmosphere still lingered in the room like an echo. The laptop had long since gone dark, the credits finished, yet both Casper and Natsuki sat quietly as if still caught inside Metropolis's towering city. Natsuki sighed deeply, wiped the last traces of tears from her face with her palm, and stood. Okay, I need something sweet right now. She disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a plate of cupcakes. Setting them down on the coffee table, she slid one of the smallest toward Casper, still nearly as big as he was. Here, a comfort cupcake, she said with a crooked smile, though her cheeks were still flushed from crying. Casper laughed softly, lifting the enormous treat. I think I'm going to have a hard time finishing this whole thing. She giggled, biting into her own. Then fight your way through it. You manage Dragon Ball so you can handle a cupcake. He took a small bite, the sugar melting on his tongue. It actually helps. Sweetness after something so heavy, it feels right. Yeah, she murmured, staring down at her cupcake. The movie was beautiful, but harsh too. I could feel it settle in my stomach. She paused, then added quietly, I think I get now why you cried the first time you saw it. Casper looked up at her, warmth filling his chest. It means a lot that you wanted to watch it with me. I feel like we share something special now. Natsuki blushed instantly and looked away, though her smile lingered. Shh. You always say things that make me sound weak. But she glanced back, her gaze soft. It doesn't actually feel that bad. Sharing it. They sat there, taking small bites of cupcakes, their conversation drifting easily. About the film's colors, about the music still echoing in their heads, about Tima, the robot girl, and how her innocence had touched them both. I think, Natsuki said slowly, that maybe I want to watch more of the things you've seen. If you promise to be there when I cry again. Casper chuckled gently. I promise. And with sugar on their tongues and warmth in their hearts, it felt as though the evening had finally found its balance, between tears and laughter, between strength and vulnerability. Chapter 29, A Knock at the Door. The last crumbs of cupcake lay scattered on the plate between them. Natsuki sat curled up with her legs beneath her, Casper resting on the table in front of her. They had talked for a long while, about the film, about manga, about little things that made the silence feel warm instead of heavy. Then came 3 sharp knocks on the door. Knock, knock, knock. Natsuki jolted, her eyes wide. Who the heck is knocking now? She jumped to her feet, chair scraping across the floor, glaring at the door like a startled cat. Casper looked up calmly. Maybe it's just Sayori. She did say she was excited to hear how things went. Natsuki scoffed, her cheeks instantly red. Of course it's her. She can never keep her nose out of things. The door clicked open, and a familiar face peeked in. Sayori's smile was bright, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. Hey, she sang. I just thought I'd stop by and see how you two were doing. She stepped in without hesitation, her gaze flicking quickly from Natsuki to the table. and landing on Casper. "Oh, there you are, little one," she said with a grin. "Has Natsuki been nice to you?" Casper smiled, but stayed quiet at first. Natsuki crossed her arms, her face scarlet. "Of course I have. Like I don't know how to take care of a guest. Give me some credit, okay?" Sayori tilted her head, her smile soft but mischievous. "I can feel something special happened here. You probably talked about deep things, didn't you?" Natsuki snapped her gaze away, hands clenched tight. "Don't be stupid, Sayori. We just watched a movie, ate some cupcakes. Totally normal." Casper couldn't help but chuckle. She's actually been really sweet. Natsuki froze, shot him a glance, then looked away so quickly her hair whipped with the movement. "Shh! Don't say stuff like that in front of her," Sayori giggled, stepping closer to the table and leaning down until her face filled Casper's whole view. "I knew it. She can't hide it when she blushes like that." Natsuki covered her face with both hands, muttering, "I hate you both right now." But even as she said it, Casper caught the small, hidden smile fighting to break free behind her hands. Chapter 30. Sayori's Visit. Sayori pulled up a chair without asking, sliding it closer to the table. She leaned toward Casper, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "So, how's the weekend been so far? Has Natsuki taken good care of you?" Casper smiled. "Yes, she's actually been really great. She even shared her cupcakes with me." "Really?" Sayori laughed loudly, turning toward Natsuki. "That's a huge step. You must really like him if you're sharing your cupcakes." Natsuki blushed furiously and flailed her hands. "Stop it, Sayori. You make it sound like I'm in love with him or something." She dropped onto the sofa with her arms crossed, though her eyes kept flicking toward Casper and Sayori, as if afraid of being outshone. Casper could feel her unease, but Sayori was too caught up in the moment to notice. She leaned closer to him, whispering almost conspiratorially, "You know, she acts tough, but she's got such a huge heart. You've just found a side of her that we almost never get to see." "Hey," Natsuki shot up, her face blazing red. "Don't talk about me like I'm not here." Casper chuckled softly. "She's right, Natsuki. You're better than you give yourself credit for." Natsuki narrowed her eyes, jealousy flashing in them. "Humph. Of course she'd say that. She's always such a sugar ball." She sat down again, this time edging closer to Casper, as if to mark that he was her guest. After a while, some chatter, some laughter, some gentle teasing, Sayori stood and stretched her arms high. "Well, this was fun. I just wanted to stop by and make sure you two were doing okay." She smiled warmly, first at Natsuki, then at Casper. "Thanks for today. Take good care of each other." Yeah, Natsuki muttered, waving her off, though her eyes were softer than her words. When the door closed behind Sayori, silence settled for a moment. Natsuki sank back down with a sigh, scowling a little at Casper. "You don't have to smile like that. She always takes all the attention, but..." She blushed, looking away. "But I'm glad she left. Now we can talk properly." Chapter 31. The Mask of Words. After Sayori left, a strange quiet filled the room. The evening light had dimmed, and only the faint hum of the refrigerator could be heard. Natsuki dropped heavily onto the sofa, arms folded tight across her chest as she sighed. Casper sat on the coffee table, gazing up at her. He hesitated, but decided he had to ask. "Natsuki," he began carefully, "I want to ask you something, but only because I respect you, okay?" She turned her head toward him, her brow furrowing. "What now?" "The way you sometimes talk to your friends, sharp, sarcastic. Aren't you ever afraid they might take it the wrong way? That maybe they think you don't care about them?" She froze, a blush rising in her cheeks, and her defenses snapped up immediately. "What are you talking about? That's just how I am. If they can't handle it, that's their problem." Casper shook his head gently, his voice calm. "I don't think you do it because you dislike them. I think you do it because you're scared of what happens if you show softness." Her eyes flickered. She clenched her fists and half turned away. "Shh, you don't even know me. Why would you think you've got me all figured out?" "I'm only saying it because I respect you," Casper repeated firmly. "Because I can see you're more than you pretend to be. You're not just the harsh words. You're caring, you're strong, and you've got friends who'd be hurt if they thought you didn't trust them." She sat completely still, her shoulders tight. Then, slowly, her facade slipped, her head bowed, hair falling like a curtain over her eyes. I talk like that because it's all I know." Casper said nothing. He let her find the words herself. My dad, she sniffled, biting her lip hard. He's always made me feel small. Lower. Like I wasn't worth anything. If I tried to say what I really felt, I just got pushed down again. So I learned to talk loud, sharp, before anyone else could hurt me. She lifted her head slightly, her eyes shining with tears but burning with intensity. So yeah, sometimes I say harsh things to Sayori, Yuri, and Monica. Not because I want to, but because I'm scared. I'm scared that if I show too much, they'll leave me. Just like her voice cracked. Just like my mom did. Not because she wanted to, but because she died. And I've never felt whole since. Casper stepped closer, placing his tiny hand on her finger. Natsuki, you're not alone anymore. And those girls, your friends, they would never leave you just for showing them who you really are. If anything, they'd love you more for it. You're worth so much more than your dad ever made you believe. Her lips trembled, and she gave a nervous laugh, even as a tear slid down her cheek. Why are you always so damn calm? I hate it. And yet, she looked straight at him now, her gaze sharp but vulnerable. And yet it feels like you see right through me, and it doesn't scare me as much as I thought it would. She drew a long breath, her shoulders easing. Maybe I should try. Talking to them differently, showing them I really do care. I owe them that. Casper smiled gently. You don't owe it, but you deserve it. You deserve to be heard and loved for who you really are. For the first time in a long while, she leaned back on the sofa without crossing her arms, without spitting sharp words. Just a girl, slowly letting herself be human. Chapter 32, One Step at a Time. The morning sun cast golden light through the kitchen window. On the table sat 2 slices of toast, a couple of fruits, and, of course, a single cupcake that Natsuki had placed in front of Casper with a, "It's only because you're so small you can't eat a real breakfast." Casper smiled and took a small bite, looking up at her. Even though her tone was sharp, he could feel the warmth behind her words, a new softness that hadn't been there before. "You're quiet today," he said calmly. Natsuki shrugged, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. I'm just thinking about what we talked about yesterday. It's not easy to change from one day to the next, but she took a bite of her toast, eyes dropping to her plate. I'll try. Casper nodded. That's all that matters. She sent him a quick glance, embarrassed yet grateful, before pushing her chair back and standing up. Come on, little guy. We've got school. And don't you dare fall out of my pocket, okay? That would be seriously hard to explain. She picked him up carefully and placed him in her jacket pocket, where he could feel her hand pressing lightly around him, a hidden reassurance. The school buzzed with life as they walked in. Voices filled the hallways, shoes echoed against the floors, and the faint scent of paper and dust lingered in the air. When they reached the literature club room, Casper could already hear the girls' voices inside, Sayori laughing loudly at something Yuri had said, and Monica's calm voice following after. Natsuki stopped at the door, took a deep breath, and muttered, Okay, I can do this. Just one step at a time. She opened the door. Good morning, Natsuki. Sayori greeted instantly, her smile wide and full of warmth. Good morning, Yuri added softly, her hands folded neatly in front of her. Monica smiled and tilted her head slightly. Good to see you. Natsuki hesitated for a second. Normally, she would have fired off a sarcastic remark or a curt, yeah, but she remembered last night's talk. She lowered her gaze, breathed deeply, then looked at them. Good morning, she said, real, without sarcasm, her voice still a little sharp, but honest. Sayori blinked in surprise, then her smile widened even further as she wrapped Natsuki in a quick hug. It's so nice to hear you say it like that. Natsuki turned bright red, struggling to push her away, but Casper could feel her hand tighten around him inside the pocket, not in anger, but in nervousness. Yuri offered a small, gentle smile. It suits you. Monica nodded approvingly, as if she had just witnessed an important first step. You've always had it in you, Natsuki. Natsuki sighed, rolled her eyes, and muttered, Stop it. You're making me sound like an idiot. But Casper could feel her heartbeat racing, and that deep down, she was relieved. Chapter 33, A New Balance. The room buzzed with the usual life. Books lay scattered across the table. Sayori hummed softly to herself. Yuri slowly turned the pages of a new poetry collection, and Monica wrote notes on the board. Natsuki dropped into a chair with Casper tucked in her pocket, but her expression was different today, more determined. She had promised herself she would try, not to change who she was, but to show that she could be a friend without always hiding behind sharp words. So, she said, pulling out a small stack of manga, I thought we could do something fun today. I brought Parfait Girls. Don't laugh. It's actually good. Sayori's eyes lit up instantly. Oh, I love it when you share your things, Natsuki. You always look so passionate when you talk about them. Natsuki blushed but made a face. You're just saying that to be nice. No, Sayori replied firmly, still smiling. I mean it. Yuri, usually more interested in novels and deep poetry, carefully picked up the book. The illustrations are very charming. I can see why it appeals to you. Natsuki blinked, surprised, then tried to hide her joy behind a half-smile. Heh, thanks, I guess. Casper could feel how her hand gripped the fabric of her pocket a little tighter, a small gesture that told him Yuri's words had truly touched her. Monica turned from the board, setting the marker down, and leaned on the table. It's good to see you share more, Natsuki. When you show us what you love, we learn more about you, and that makes us stronger as friends. Natsuki looked away, but this time without a sharp retort. She only mumbled, It's just me. It's not a big deal. It's big enough, Casper said calmly from her pocket, his voice low but certain. She pressed her hand against the fabric, discreetly, a silent thank you, before turning back to the others. The rest of the day passed with laughter, readings, and light conversations. Natsuki still snapped now and then, especially when Sayori made silly remarks. But the difference was clear. Her words were lighter, more teasing, without the harsh edge she usually carried. When the club meeting ended, they all stood a little closer, as if something invisible had bound them tighter together. On the way home, with Casper safe in her pocket, Natsuki sighed, but it was a relieved sigh. That wasn't so bad. Maybe I can be myself without being an idiot all the time. Casper chuckled softly. I could have told you that. She scoffed but smiled. Shut up. You're annoying, but you're probably right. Chapter 34. Relaxation and the Next Step. The clubroom was bathed in soft afternoon light. The curtains let stripes of sun spill across the table, where books, papers, and cupcakes, naturally, were scattered. Sayori sat with her legs pulled up on the chair, humming with a smile as she folded papers into tiny origami figures. Monica read in a notebook, her neat handwriting dancing across the pages. Yuri sat immersed in a poetry collection, her fingers brushing carefully over the pages, as if the book were something alive and fragile. Natsuki lifted Casper out of her pocket and set him down on the table in front of her. There. Now you can hear the words properly. Her voice still had a sharp edge, but in her eyes was a warmth she couldn't hide. They took turns reading aloud. Sayori with her bright, unsteady voice, full of feeling and small bursts of laughter. Monica clear and confident, almost like a teacher, yet able to make the words feel intimate. Yuri read slowly, her voice soft and intense, each word echoing in the room, her hands trembling slightly, but her eyes glowing whenever she could dive into the depth of the text. Casper sat still, listening, soaking in every word. It felt almost magical, like language itself was a thread weaving them closer together. When it was Natsuki's turn, she coughed nervously but began anyway, reading from her manga. Her voice was sharp but eager, and Casper could feel how much she threw herself into the characters. When she finished, she snorted and slammed the book down. That was nothing special. Sayori clapped her hands. It was amazing, Natsuki. Yuri nodded slowly, her voice calm. You put a certain strength into the words. Not everyone can do that. Natsuki turned bright red. Stop it! You're too much. Casper smiled and stepped forward on the table so everyone could see him. I just want to say thank you, especially to you, Natsuki. These past days have meant a lot to me. I know I don't take up much space. He laughed softly, pointing at himself. But it feels like I found a place here. Natsuki stared at him as if she didn't know what to say. Her lips trembled for a moment, then she turned away. You're such an idiot, but I'm glad you were here. She looked down, her hands shaking faintly, but Casper could see how much it meant. Sayori tilted her head, her eyes glinting. So, who's going to take Casper home next time? Monica smiled but said nothing. Yuri remained silent too, her hands folded tightly around her book. She looked as though she didn't dare meet anyone's eyes. Then, slowly, Yuri lifted her head. Her cheeks were lightly flushed, but her eyes shone with intensity. Perhaps, if no one else insists, I could. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, but filled with hidden longing. Natsuki narrowed her eyes. Just take care of him. He's not a bookmark you can tuck away. Yuri blushed deeper and clutched her book tighter. I never would. Casper looked from one girl to the other. He could already sense that the days ahead would feel completely different. Quieter, more intense. Yuri was nothing like Natsuki. She carried her heart in the shadows, and he knew that if he was to get closer to her, it would have to be with patience. Chapter 35, The Breast Pocket and the Forest. After the club meeting, silence had fallen over the school. Yuri walked slowly down the corridor, her shoes making barely a sound against the floor. She had carefully placed Casper in the breast pocket of her cardigan, where he sat safely, surrounded by the scent of tea and paper that seemed to cling to her. From his view, he could see the soft lines of her collarbone beneath the fabric, and every time she drew a deep breath, the world around him rose and fell gently. Is it okay? She asked softly, glancing down at him. I thought the pocket is closer to my heart, so you wouldn't feel so far away. Casper smiled up at her. It's perfect. It feels safe. They walked out of the school, down the steps and onto the street. The air was fresh, the sun low. Yuri held her bag in one hand, her fingers twisting nervously around the straps. She seemed shy about carrying him, but at the same time very aware of every step she took. Casper looked up at her face. What do you usually do when you go home from school? Do you have a place you like to be? She blinked, surprised by the question, and a small smile touched her lips. I actually do. She inhaled slowly. Sometimes, when the day has been heavy, I don't go straight home. Instead, I take a detour. She turned down a smaller street where houses thinned out and trees grew closer. There's a little path behind the library that leads into a forest. It's nothing special, just trees, birds, a small stream, but it's quiet. She gazed ahead as if she could already see it. I can sit there for hours, listen to the leaves, the water, the birds. It's a place where I can just be myself without anyone watching. Casper leaned against the edge of the pocket. That sounds peaceful, like you can finally breathe there. Yuri nodded slowly, her eyes softening. Yes, it feels as if the world grows smaller and bigger at the same time. Less noise, but more space inside me. She looked down at him again, her voice almost a whisper. This is the first time I've taken anyone there. Not even Sayori has ever been. Casper felt her heartbeat against the fabric behind him. Thank you for wanting to share it with me. She blushed lightly, but her smile didn't fade. I want to show you who I am when I'm not in the club. I'm not always as calm as I seem. I have darker sides, my thoughts, but in the forest it feels like they soften. They walked on, houses fading behind them. Ahead, the forest spread out, green and quiet, with a narrow path winding between the trees like a hidden road. Yuri stepped inside, the light dimming, the air cooler. Birds sang, mixing with the whisper of wind in the leaves. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment as her shoulders relaxed. Welcome to my sanctuary, she said softly. And from her breast pocket, Casper could hear her heart slowing, calming, as if he had entered her quiet world too. Chapter 36, The Forest's Breath. The trees stood close, their crowns woven into a green ceiling. Sunlight spilled in stripes, dancing across the moss, and a small stream murmured in the background. Birds sang softly, their tones circling like a whisper that wrapped around them. Yuri walked slowly along the path until she reached a small clearing with a tree stump in the center. She set down her bag, sat upon the stump, and gently pulled her cardigan aside to lift Casper out. She held him in her palm for a moment, letting him sit there as she gazed out over the forest. Her hair shimmered faintly in the light, her eyes reflecting green from the leaves. This is where I usually sit, she said quietly. Here no one expects anything of me. No club, no school, no voices, only me. She placed him gently on the soft moss beside her boot. From his perspective, her figure rose like a statue in the forest, but her shoulders were relaxed, her hands folded loosely in her lap. I know I seem calm, she continued, her voice a low echo among the trees. But inside, I'm often not calm. I get overwhelmed with thoughts, darkness, worries. I can feel ugly inside. She lowered her head, closing her eyes. So I come here, to breathe, to remind myself that the world can also be quiet and beautiful. Casper sat down in the moss and looked up at her. It feels like the forest embraces you. She looked down at him, a faint blush on her cheeks, but her smile was gentle. Yes, maybe. It's a little strange, but I feel the trees are listening, as if they hold my secrets without judgment. For a moment, she just sat there, listening to the water. Then she slowly pulled a small book from her bag. Not a novel, but a worn notebook. She held it close, as though it were sacred. I write here, she said softly. When I don't dare share my words in the club, these pages, they're me, but also the thoughts I can't say aloud. She turned it over in her hands, hesitated, then looked down at Casper. I've never shown this to anyone. She opened the book, flipping to a page of dense handwriting. I can read a little, if you want. Casper nodded, but said nothing more. He knew she was about to give him a gift one should never pressure. Yuri drew a deep breath, and with her voice low and soft, she read the first lines. The words were dark but beautiful. They spoke of being trapped in a glass bottle underwater, where the light fractured into patterns, and yet there was hope somewhere above. Her hands trembled slightly, but as she continued, her voice grew steadier, and in the forest's silence, her words became something almost magical. When she closed the book, silence lingered. She set it aside, her eyes glistening, not with tears, but with relief. I've never read this aloud for anyone before, she said, but I feel like I can hear. Casper smiled up at her. Thank you for sharing it with me. She looked away, but her lips curved into a small smile. Maybe it's not so dangerous to show a little more of myself. A breeze swept through the forest, stirring the leaves like gentle applause. Chapter 37, Yuri's Questions. The forest clearing was quiet. Only the wind brushing through the leaves and the distant murmur of the stream broke the silence. Yuri still sat on the tree stump with Casper in her hands. Her long hair hung like a violet curtain, shimmering in the sunbeams. She looked down at him, her eyes dark and searching. Casper, may I ask you something? She said softly. I sense so much you don't say out loud. Casper nodded. You can. She hesitated for a moment, then let the words slip out, gentle but precise. Now that you're so small, does the world feel different to you? Larger or more threatening? Casper gazed up at the canopy where sunspots danced across the leaves. I feel like I see the world in a new way. The small details people usually miss, they're beautiful. Things that once seemed frightening now look beautiful. Yuri blinked, a blush rising in her cheeks. That's beautifully said, she whispered. That's how I feel about books. They reveal small details in people I might otherwise overlook. She straightened a little, drawing a deep breath. Before you came here, what made you happy? A small smile touched Casper's lips. Being with the people I loved. Even when nothing special happened, it was enough. I spent most of my time with my parents. We shared so many wonderful moments. But now I see I won't have them for long. They'll die. So I have to hold on to the good times, even in the darkest hours. Yuri was silent, her eyes glistening as her fingers brushed gently over him, a wordless comfort. That's very wise. To see the light, even knowing it fades. She breathed in deeply. Do you also have a place that feels like a sanctuary? Like this forest is for me? Casper nodded. I'm a loner. It might sound strange, but I like sitting at my computer, playing games, watching YouTube, just relaxing. That's where I find peace. Yuri smiled faintly. That doesn't sound strange. It sounds like a place where you can be yourself. She tilted her head slightly, her eyes glimmering. You once said you loved listening to stories. Is there one that means something special to you? Casper blushed a little. I've heard many, but one always stays with me. Ranja the Robber's Daughter. It's not grand, just a girl creating adventures of her own. Yuri's smile deepened, a true smile. That's beautiful. I think you and I have more in common than I thought. To create one's own adventure may be the most human thing of all. She paused, gazing into the trees. When you look at me and the others, what do you feel? Are we frightening, beautiful, or something else entirely? Casper looked up at her, his cheeks warm. I see girls who are kind and beautiful. Yes, but I also see pain, something you hide, even from those who love you most. Yuri's gaze softened. She placed him gently back on her palm and ran her thumb slowly across the moss beside him. That cuts deep. I think you're right. I've always felt that if I revealed too much, people would turn away. Maybe I was wrong. She took a slow breath. And one last thing. Do you have a dream, Casper? Something you wish to do once you find yourself again? Casper looked down at his small hand, then up at her. I don't have one dream. I'm still searching. But I think there are many dreams, not just one. Many paths out there I could take, and I'm not afraid to go back to try another. Yuri closed her eyes briefly, a quiet sigh escaping her lips. Not heavy, but relieved. That's a beautiful answer, she said softly. I think I needed to hear it. When she looked down at him again, there was no shyness in her gaze anymore, only warmth and respect. Maybe you can help me find my paths too, Casper smiled. Maybe we can find them together. And in the stillness of the forest, they sat for a while, a girl and a tiny friend, letting the words settle as the wind carried them away through the trees. Chapter 38, Beneath the Skin. The forest was nearly silent now. The sun was sinking behind the treetops, casting everything in a golden, dreamlike glow. Yuri still sat on the stump with Casper in her hands, her hair a violet cloud around her face. She had read a little more from her notebook, but now it lay closed in her lap. She stared down at her hands as if she no longer saw the forest, but something inside herself. Casper. Her voice was low, almost a sigh. I told you before that I have dark sides, things I don't show anyone. It's more than just thoughts. Slowly, she pushed back the sleeve of her cardigan. The light slid across her forearm and revealed thin, faded lines. Not raw, but pale scars that only appeared if one looked closely. This, her hand trembled slightly, is nothing I'm proud of. Sometimes when everything becomes too much, when the voices in my head scream, I've done things I regret, it doesn't hurt less afterward. But for a moment, I can feel myself again, and afterward, I feel even more alone. Casper sat silently in her palm, his heart heavy. He didn't speak right away. He knew sometimes silence is what someone needs. She pulled the sleeve down again, but not quickly, not as if hiding it this time. She looked down at him, her eyes glistening. I'm showing you this because I can't carry it alone anymore. I've never told anyone in the club. They just think I'm strange, but I'm also broken. Casper placed his tiny hand against her thumb, pressing gently. Yuri, he said softly, thank you for showing me. That's not weakness. That's courage. She blinked, tears pressing forward, but her lips curved into a small, trembling smile. I was so afraid you'd see me as disgusting, but you just see me. I see you, said Casper. Not your scars, you. A small sob escaped her, and then she cupped her hand around him, not to hide him, but to feel that he was there. It feels like I can breathe a little more now, she whispered. Casper leaned into her skin, letting her feel the warmth of his tiny body. You're not alone anymore. Not today. Not here. Yuri closed her eyes, drew a deep breath, and let the forest silence wrap around them both. Birds began to sing again, as if they understood something long hidden had finally been spoken aloud. Chapter 39, Twilight's Walk Home. The forest had grown heavy with dusk. The green leaves had turned to dark silhouettes, and the golden beams of sunlight had vanished between the trunks. The stream's murmur sounded deeper now, and the bird song had thinned to short, scattered calls. Yuri sat for a moment longer on the tree stump with Casper in her hands. She breathed slowly, as if trying to draw every drop of peace from the place before leaving it behind. It's getting dark, she said softly, her voice husky after all she had spoken. We should probably go. Casper nodded. Yeah? He looked up at her from her palm. Thank you for showing me this. She glanced down at him, and this time her smile wasn't nervous. It was small, but real. Thank you for listening. Gently, she tucked him back into the breast pocket of her cardigan, close against the steady rhythm of her heartbeat. Then she rose, slipped her bag over her shoulder, and began walking along the path back toward town. The forest folded behind them like a soft blanket. With every step, the trees grew lower, the trail wider, until the first street lamp glimmered in the distance. Yuri kept one hand pressed lightly over her pocket, as if to make sure he was still there. I feel a little lighter, she murmured as they walked. As if the forest has taken some of what I carried. It feels strange, but good. Casper leaned against the fabric, his voice muffled but steady. That's because you shared it. She nodded, and there was a quiet strength in her eyes, even in the dark. Maybe it's the first time I'm not going home alone, even though I'm alone. They reached the forest's edge where the city lights spread golden patches across the asphalt. Yuri drew a long, deep breath, as if pulling courage into her lungs. "Let's go home," she said gently. "We can continue tomorrow." She stepped forward into the glow of the street lamps, their light brushing across her face while night gathered around them, yet this time, it didn't feel quite so dark. Chapter 40, Yuri's Home. The city lights already glowed through windows when Yuri turned her key in the lock and pushed the door open. A soft, warm scent of tea drifted out to greet them, as though the house itself breathed literature. She stepped inside, slipped off her shoes, and closed the door quietly behind her. She lifted Casper from her breast pocket and set him carefully on a small side table in the entryway. From there, he saw her world for the first time. The hallway was narrow but cozy. Wooden frames lined the walls, holding prints of old paintings and nature scenes, misty forests, still lakes, solitary figures. A dark blue runner, embroidered with flowers, stretched along the floor, while a single lampshade cast warm circles of light across the walls. Yuri shrugged off her cardigan and hung it neatly on a hook. Casper noticed how her shoulders relaxed a little now that she was home. She picked him up again and carried him into the living room. It was a dream for any book lover. Tall shelves reached from floor to ceiling, crammed with everything from heavy classics to slim notebooks. In the corner sat a low table with a teapot and 2 porcelain cups, as if always waiting. Heavy violet curtains framed the window, and a soft armchair with a folded plaid stood pulled forward, its own private reading nook. The air was filled with the quiet fragrance of tea, wood, and paper. "Welcome to my home," Yuri said softly. "It's not large, but it's my place." She continued into the kitchen, which opened into the living room. Dark tiles lined the floor, a wooden counter stretched beneath shelves of glass jars labeled in careful handwriting, teas, spices, herbs. It was tidy but not sterile. It felt lived in, a place made to bring calm. She set Casper on the countertop beside a small pot of fresh thyme. "I thought we could make something simple together," she said, beginning to gather ingredients. "Nothing fancy tonight, but I have fresh vegetables, some bread, maybe soup." After washing her hands, she rolled up her sleeves and began chopping. The rhythm of knife against board was calm and practiced. "I'll make a warm soup for us," she said with a small smile. "It's good after a long day." She glanced down at him. "Would you like to help? Maybe stir the pot once it's simmering? I can find you a little spoon." Her tone was still gentle, but a playful glimmer sparked in her eyes. A pot went on the stove. Oil hissed as onions and carrots met the heat, their sweet fragrance quickly filling the kitchen. Water and spices followed, and steam rose, wrapping the room in warmth. "It's strange," she murmured after a moment, her back turned as she stirred. "I'm not used to cooking for someone else. It feels different, but nice." From his spot by the thyme plant, Casper could see her shoulders fully at ease now, her movements steady and unhurried. It felt like she wasn't just cooking soup. She was building a moment of home for them both. Chapter 41, Soup and Conversation. The kitchen had become a sanctuary of its own. The pot on the stove had finished simmering, filling the air with the warmth of herbs and vegetables. Outside, the heavy night pressed in, making the room glow like a safe little den. Yuri carefully ladled soup into a bowl for herself and found a small porcelain bowl for Casper, setting it before him on the table with a tiny teaspoon. "There," she said with a small smile, "our first real meal together." Casper took a cautious sip. The soup was warm, sweet, with a trace of thyme from the little pot on the counter. Yuri sat across from him, her cheek resting against her hand, eyes both gentle and searching. "I want to know you better," she said softly. "You say such wise things about me, but I know almost nothing about you." She twirled her spoon absently. When you're not playing games or watching videos, what makes you calm? Is there something that makes you forget time exists?" Casper looked down at his soup, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I usually take long walks with a podcast in my ears, an hour at a time, sometimes several times a day. I just wander." Yuri nodded slowly, as though picturing him walking through quiet streets. "That sounds peaceful, like your own kind of forest." Her gaze dropped to her soup, then rose again. "Is there a book or a game that changed you? Something you still carry with you?" Casper thought for a moment, then sipped again. "I'm not sure. I've played so many games, and each of them helped me in different ways. I wasn't good at reading, but the games taught me more than school ever could." Yuri's eyes softened. Then games have been your books, she whispered. They gave you words, like novels gave them to me. There was a pause. Her voice dropped lower. You seem so calm when you talk to me. Were you always like that? Casper blushed faintly. No, I was bullied for years in school because I was a loner. Easy to laugh at, easy to throw things at. They even threw stones because they knew I'd snap, and they thought it was funny. But I'm not the same person I was back then. Yuri's fingers tightened slightly around her spoon. That hurts to hear, she murmured. I think I understand a little. How it feels to be made small, it's not something you just forget. She breathed in, then asked gently, if you could relive one moment of your life, not to change it, but just to feel it again, what would it be? Casper felt a lump rise in his throat. I'd be with my parents when we traveled to France, just enjoying it, seeing things together. His voice cracked, and he wiped a tear quickly away. My dad has cancer. I know he won't live much longer, so we have to treasure the time we have. Yuri slowly reached a fingertip across the table, resting it near him like an unspoken invitation. It's beautiful that you can say it out loud, she whispered. It shows strength. I hope you get every moment you can with him. Her cheeks colored as she blinked quickly. Then she asked, almost shyly, and when you look at me, how do you see me? Casper drew in a steady breath. I see you as a friend. You're kind to me, and we can talk easily. That's the best thing in the world to me. A small, trembling smile curved Yuri's lips. That means more than you think. She leaned back, her long hair sliding over her shoulder. Do you have a wish for us, for something you hope we can do together while you're here? Casper smiled faintly. Just enjoy the time. Talk about everything and nothing. Yuri gave a quiet laugh, warm and soft. I like that. Everything and nothing. Maybe that's where truth lives. She sipped her soup, and for the first time that day, her shoulders were completely at rest. Without saying it aloud, the two of them had built a small, safe space around themselves, right there in the kitchen, wrapped in quiet. Chapter 42, Evening Rituals. Dinner was finished, bowls rinsed and set to dry. The kitchen air still carried the warm scent of soup mingled with tea and fresh thyme. Yuri lifted Casper gently, holding him for a moment as she walked back into the living room. I usually, she began slowly, after meals, have a little ritual. It helps me settle. She placed him carefully on the coffee table so he could watch. She drew the curtains closed, lit a small lamp with a soft golden glow, then crossed to her tall bookshelf. From the top shelf, she brought down a tin box marked with Japanese characters. Opening it, the fragrance of dried tea leaves filled the room, floral, delicate. First, I make tea, she said quietly. It's nothing special, but I do it the same way every night. Water, leaves, thyme. She set the kettle, measured the leaves, and waited as steam began to curl upward. Then I choose a book. Not always the same one, just whichever calls to me. She slid a slim, well-worn volume from the shelf and ran her fingers down its spine as though it were alive. Casper watched as her whole posture softened. The room itself seemed to transform, from an ordinary living space into something sacred. She poured herself tea, then found a tiny lidded dish, filling it with a few drops and setting it in front of him. Just so you can smell it, she said with a small, shy smile. Then she slipped off her cardigan, folded it neatly, and draped it over the chair. Beneath, she wore a simple loose blouse, not fancy, just soft and comfortable. The next part is my favorite, she murmured. I sit here, pull up the blanket, and read. Not always long, just enough for my mind to quiet down. She settled into the armchair with her book and cup, placing Casper on the armrest near her elbow. That way you can see me if you'd like, she said. Pages whispered as she turned them. Sometimes her lips moved silently with the words. A few times she glanced up at him, her eyes dark yet calm. It's strange, she said suddenly. I've never had anyone with me for this. It feels different, like my ritual isn't just mine anymore. She set the book aside briefly, stretching a little. I usually light a small lavender oil burner before bed, too, she added. Rising, she found the porcelain dish, set a tea light beneath, and soon a soft lavender fragrance drifted through the room, mingling with the tea. It helps me sleep, she explained. I know I seem calm, but inside, my mind can be a storm. So I build little rituals, bridges to walk across until I drift off. She sat again, glancing at him with a faint, nervous laugh. You probably think I'm strange. Casper shook his head. I think it's beautiful. Her cheeks flushed, but the smile stayed. Maybe tonight you can just stay here. Watch me fall into calm, then maybe we'll both sleep a little easier. She sipped her tea, leaned back in the chair, and let the lavender, the golden lamp, and the book's quiet presence wrap them both in stillness. Chapter 43. Where Will You Sleep? The lavender scent still lingered in the air like a soft haze, and the golden glow of the lamp made Yuri's hair shimmer deep violet. She rose from the armchair, set her teacup aside, and began tidying away her little rituals. She placed the book on the nightstand in the adjoining room, folded the blanket with slow, precise movements, and for a moment Casper simply watched her from the armrest, feeling as though the evening had stretched into another world where everything moved slower. When she returned, she clasped her hands in front of her, looking down at him, her cheeks faintly pink. Casper, she began softly, almost hesitantly. Can I ask you something? Personal? He nodded. Of course. Her face twisted in a small grimace, as if the words fought to come out. With the other girls, where did you actually sleep? She quickly looked away, her fingers twisting in her cardigan. I don't mean anything by it. I'm just curious. Casper smiled gently. I slept beside them, but, he lifted his gaze, his voice warm, it's for you to decide where I sleep. I want you to feel comfortable. Yuri blinked, the blush deepening as she bit her lip. Oh, I see. She lowered her gaze again, fingers clenching the fabric a little tighter. It's just, I'm not used to having someone so close. It feels strange, but not in a bad way. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in her lap, and took a deep breath. Maybe you could sleep on the nightstand next to me tonight, so I can get used to having you here without feeling like I'm intruding. Her eyes lifted to him again, shining but uncertain. Would that be all right with you? Casper nodded. That would be perfectly fine. I'm here to be your friend. What matters is that you feel at ease. A small, relieved smile touched her lips, and she shook her head softly. You always say the right things. She stood, fetched a little box, and folded a napkin into a makeshift mattress. Here, she whispered, your place, right next to me. She set him gently on the nightstand, where he could see her as she drew the curtains shut. The lamplight cast soft shadows across the room, lavender mingling with the warmth of her breath. Good night, Casper, she said quietly as she slipped under the covers. Thank you for being here. He smiled and settled into his tiny bed. Good night, Yuri. She blushed faintly, but the smile didn't leave her face. For the first time in a long while, the night didn't feel lonely for her, only safe. Chapter 44, The Voice in the Dream. The night lay heavy over the house. The lavender scent had faded now, leaving only a faint glow from the small tea light in the oil burner, its shadows dancing gently across the wall. Yuri slept deeply beneath her blanket, one hand resting near the nightstand where Casper lay in his little bed. Her breathing was steady, a soft tide moving back and forth. Casper drifted into dreams. He stood before his computer. The screen glowed coldly in the dark like a bluish sun. On it he saw himself, the tiny figure lying asleep beside Yuri, as if a camera had been pointed directly into reality. A voice broke the silence. Not loud, but close, as if it whispered straight into his ear, You've done it. They're all happy now. Only one remains. The image on the screen flickered. One by one, the windows went dark, like lights going out in a house. Darkness spread over the display, and suddenly he saw himself on the screen, no longer asleep but awake, staring up at him with a wide, unsettling smile, as though a stranger wore his face. Casper stumbled back in the dream, his heart racing. The voice whispered again, almost tenderly, Soon. The picture collapsed into black pixels, and everything fell silent. Casper gasped and jolted awake. He was back on the nightstand, lavender in the air, Yuri's breathing calm beside him. But his heart pounded fast, and instinct told him he wouldn't share this dream. Not yet. He sat up in his tiny bed and looked at Yuri. She stirred, stretching slowly beneath the covers, her eyes fluttering open. Good morning. Her voice was husky but soft. She rubbed the sleep from her eyes and looked at him with a smile that was different from the night before. Wider, warmer, open. I slept well. I feel lighter today. She sat up, her hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders. I don't know why, but it feels like something inside me is less heavy. She looked down at him, still smiling. Thank you for being here. Casper managed a faint smile back, though the chill of the dream clung to him. "Good morning, Yuri." Her eyes sparkled as she leaned a little closer. "Today I want to show you something special. Not just books, but a place in the house I've never shown anyone." Casper nodded slowly. "I'd like that." And even though the shadow of the dream lingered in his mind, the light in her eyes was strong enough to make the morning feel like a true beginning. Chapter 45, The Hidden Room. The morning sun was still pale and low when Yuri carried Casper through the house. She had made herself a cup of mild tea and set him gently in her palm. Her hair was still loose, and there was something soft and unpretentious about her. No mask, no sharp tone. "There's something," she said quietly as she walked down a narrow hallway, "that I've never shown anyone, not even the other girls in the club." She stopped before a door at the end of the hall. The door was old, its paint a little chipped, and it bore no sign. She pulled a small key from a cord around her neck, slid it into the lock, and turned it slowly. The hinges groaned, a long, low sigh. Inside was a small windowless room, lit only by a warm lamp. The walls were covered in shelves, but not neat like the ones in her living room. Here, books were stacked in messy piles, worn notebooks leaned against one another, and small jars of tea leaves stood beside pencils, stones, pressed flowers, and feathers. In the corner lay a low mattress with a dark blanket and a pillow. Beside it sat a small box filled with candles and a teapot. An old rug stretched across the floor, worn thin but soft as moss. The air smelled of paper, lavender, and the faint green trace of rain-soaked plants. Yuri sat down on the rug and placed Casper before her so he could see everything. Her gaze moved around the room with the expression of someone showing a child their secret hideout. "This is where I come when I really want to be alone," she said softly. "It's my refuge in the house. I read here, I write here. Sometimes I just sit." She gave a small, almost shy laugh. "I call it my breathing hole. It's probably childish." She combed her fingers through her hair, letting it fall like a veil around her face. "I collect little things from my walks and bring them here. A stone, a leaf, a feather. That way I feel like I carry a piece of the world with me, even when I'm trapped inside the house." Her eyes turned to him, dark but warm. "I've never shown this to anyone, but I wanted to show it to you." Casper looked around, then up at her. "It's beautiful, Yuri. It feels like being inside your thoughts." She blushed faintly and glanced aside, but her smile remained. "Maybe that's why I've kept it hidden. I was afraid if anyone saw it, they'd think I was strange. But you look like you understand." Her fingertip traced an invisible circle on the rug near him. "Would you sit here with me for a while? Just listening. I usually light a candle and let silence be my music." She pulled out a small candle, lit it, and set it on the floor between them. The flame wavered gently, and the room filled with warm light. In that hidden corner, surrounded by her books and little treasures, the world felt transformed again. Not a forest, not a club, but a secret piece of a human soul. Chapter 46, Morning in the Breathing Hole. The candle's small flame flickered softly in the room. Yuri sat with her legs tucked under her, a notebook resting in her lap, while Casper sat on the rug before her. The walls seemed to hold their breath, filled not with silence but with tiny sounds, a distant drip, the rustle of paper, the quiet cooling of tea. She turned a page, read a few lines aloud under her breath, then closed the book and looked down at him. "I think I can breathe a little more easily when you're here," she whispered, "as if my words aren't only trapped on the page anymore." Casper smiled up at her. "It feels like you're letting me into your inner universe." A faint blush touched her cheeks, but she didn't hide this time. "Yes, I suppose I am." She leaned forward and blew out the candle. "We should probably go back to reality. If we don't hurry, we'll be late for school." She lifted him gently into her palm, stood, and stepped back into the hallway. The light out there seemed sharp after the hushed glow of the room. She closed the door behind them with a quiet click, locked it, and slipped the key back beneath her blouse. In the kitchen, she set him on the table and quickly gathered bread, cheese, and fruit. "It's not fancy," she said with a small smile, "but it's quick." She cut small pieces and set them on a plate for him, pouring a bit of juice into an egg cup so he could drink. For herself, she took a slice of bread and a cup of tea. Her movements had a calm rhythm, so different from the nervous girl in the club. They ate quietly for a while, The city waking outside, distant cars, footsteps on the sidewalk. Yuri looked up at him over the rim of her cup, her eyes softer, clearer than before. I'm actually looking forward to going to the club today, she admitted. It feels like I don't have to hide as much anymore. Casper smiled. I'm looking forward to it too. She rose, rinsed the cups, and pulled on her cardigan again. So, are you ready for another day? She asked, cheeks tinged pink once more, but in a gentler way. She placed him in her breast pocket where he could feel the steady beat of her heart. I think today will be a better day than yesterday, she whispered. Then she locked the door behind them and stepped out into the bright morning, lavender still lingering in her hair as they walked toward school, and the others. Chapter 47, Back to the Club. The morning sun hung low as Yuri crossed the schoolyard. Her steps were calm, her bag held close to her body. In her breast pocket, Casper sat safely, feeling the warmth of her heartbeat and the lavender scent still lingering in her hair. It's strange, she whispered as she walked down the corridor. I usually feel heavy when I come here, but today it feels lighter. Maybe because you're with me. The corridor buzzed with voices, but grew quieter as they reached the door to the literature club. Yuri took a deep breath and opened it. The room was bathed in soft morning light. Sayori was already at the table, folding small paper figures. Natsuki stood by the window with a manga in her hand, and Monica sat at the board, jotting down a few notes. All three looked up when Yuri stepped inside. Sayori immediately jumped up. Yuri, good morning. She hurried over, her eyes flicking down to the breast pocket and lighting up. And there's Casper. How are you two doing? Casper waved from the pocket. Hi, Sayori, he said with a small smile. Natsuki crossed her arms but smirked. So now you're officially with Yuri, huh? I just hope she doesn't read you half to pieces like she does her books. Yuri blushed faintly but smiled. I take good care of him. Monica rose calmly from her seat, her green eyes glimmering warmly. I'm glad to see you all. This has been quite the little adventure for you, Casper. First Sayori, then Natsuki, and now Yuri. She tilted her head slightly. That only leaves me, doesn't it? Casper nodded. Yeah, it seems so. Monica chuckled softly. Then we'll see what we can come up with when the time comes. Yuri went to her seat and sat down. Her shoulders were a little straighter today, her gaze clearer. She laid her hand discreetly over her pocket, as if drawing strength from the small friend she carried there. Sayori leaned across the table, smiling. So how was your weekend, Yuri? You look like you're doing better. Yuri drew a breath, looked at all of them, and said quietly, It was good. I showed Casper a place I've never shown anyone before. It felt like something heavy became lighter. Sayori's eyes sparkled. That sounds so lovely. Yuri smiled softly. Yes, it was. For a moment the room was silent, as if the girls all understood the weight of her words. Natsuki shrugged, but her tone was softer than her words. As long as you still bake cupcakes with me one day, I don't care who you're showing things to. Monica placed her hand on the table, her smile embracing them all. This is exactly what the club should be, a place where you can share your words, your places, and still have room for each other. Casper felt the warmth spreading in the room. It wasn't just a club anymore. It was a network of people slowly beginning to see each other as they truly were. And he knew the next step would be Monica, the last girl in line. Chapter 48, Cozy Moments in the Club. The light in the clubroom was soft and warm. The curtains were drawn back, and the first spring trees outside cast green shadows across the floor. The air smelled of paper, coffee, and the faint trace of Sayori's perfume. Yuri sat with a cup of tea, Casper on the table in front of her. Sayori was half lying across a stack of books, giggling at a joke she'd just read in an old poetry collection. Natsuki sat on the floor with her back against the wall, doodling in the margins of her manga, tongue poking out slightly in concentration. Monica stood leaning against the board with a notebook in hand. She was silent for a moment, as if observing the room, not in a cold, manipulative way, but with an expression that was gentle and almost maternal. She walked over to the table, sat down beside Yuri, and smiled at Casper. I think it's nice to see all of you like this, she said. It feels as if the club is finally whole. Sayori sat up. Yeah, Casper's been with all of us now. He's kind of become part of the club. Natsuki snorted and closed her notebook, though her tone wasn't sharp. He's at least better at listening than most people. She glanced at him and shrugged. Don't get used to it, little guy. Casper chuckled, and Monica laughed too, a warm sound that made the room feel even cozier. She wrapped her hand around her coffee cup and looked straight at him. I've noticed something, Casper. You have changed things here. Not just in the girls, but in the atmosphere. She glanced around at the others, who all sat more relaxed than usual. It's rare for someone from outside to make us open up like this. Yuri inhaled, looked at Monica, and said quietly, maybe it's because he sees us as we are, not just as roles. Monica nodded slowly, her smile a touch secretive but softer than the gaze anyone would expect from the game. Maybe, she said. Maybe that's exactly it. She stood, walked to the window, and looked out across the schoolyard. Sunlight shimmered in her hair, and her reflection in the glass seemed older, heavier with knowledge. One day, she said quietly, I'll tell you something, Casper, but not yet. Not until you're here with me. She turned back, smiling again, kind, almost warmly. Until then, just know that you're welcome here, and that I look forward to having you as my guest. Casper felt a shiver run through him, but not from fear. It felt more like the sense that something big was on the horizon. He looked up at Monica and nodded silently. Sayori clapped her hands. Okay, shouldn't we read something now? Or write a group poem? Natsuki rolled her eyes but pulled out her manga. Yuri set her cup aside and found a book. Monica sat back down at the table, still with that faint, knowing smile. The room filled with soft voices and the rustle of turning pages. It was a cozy moment, a quiet pause before the next step in the story. Chapter 49, Monica's Invitation. The clubroom was slowly emptying of sound. Sayori had gathered her papers and waved goodbye. Yuri stood by the window with her bag slung over her shoulder and gave Casper a small, warm smile before leaving. Natsuki had already slipped out to fetch ingredients for next week's cupcakes. Only Monica and Casper remained in the room. The sun hung low, casting orange streaks across the chalkboard and making Monica's hair glow like copper. She stood with her hands folded in front of her, quietly watching him. So, she said softly with a smile calmer than the one she usually wore, it seems it's finally my turn, Casper. She walked over to the table, sat down, rested her cheek against her hand, and looked at him. You've been with Sayori, with Natsuki, with Yuri. You've listened, you've kept their secrets, and now you're here with me. Casper nodded, feeling a strange mixture of excitement and calm. Yeah, looks like you're the last one. Monica shrugged, though her eyes never left him. Feels strange, doesn't it? Like we've been heading toward this the whole time. She leaned forward, her voice soft. Would you like to come home with me? I want to show you my world, just like the other girls did. She reached out her hand, and Casper stepped onto her palm. He could feel her pulse beating steadily beneath her skin, a calm, strong rhythm. This will be a little different, she said quietly. My home isn't like theirs. I don't want to scare you, but I do want to show you who I am when I'm not playing the role of club president. She stood, picked up her bag, and walked out of the classroom with him in her hand. The hallway was nearly empty now, with only the golden stripes of sunlight across the floor and the sound of her footsteps. They stepped out onto the street, where the evening sun painted everything in shades of gold. Monica looked down at him and smiled again. Not the perfect smile she wore in the club, but something more human, a little tired. I hope you don't mind if we take a little detour. There's something I'd like to show you on the way home. Casper looked up at her. I trust you. Monica's eyes flickered, and an almost imperceptible sigh escaped her lips. Thank you, she said, as if the word carried more weight than she herself realized. She slipped him gently into her breast pocket so he could see out as they walked. So, here we go, she whispered. And this time, you're not only going to see my home, you're going to see me. The evening breeze played with her hair, and the sounds of the city slowly faded into something quieter, as if they were walking toward the boundary between two worlds. Chapter 50, Monica's Home. After the long walk through the school corridors, it was like stepping into another world. The sun was setting, the sky washed in orange and purple, when Monica opened the door to her house. She held Casper in her hands, her fingers gripping him a little tighter than usual. Welcome, she said softly. It's not big, but I hope you'll like it. She stepped inside. A gentle scent of freshly brewed coffee and polished wood met them. The entryway was bright and tidy, almost like a showroom. A pair of shoes stood neatly aligned, and the walls were decorated not with family portraits, but with large prints of landscapes and stylized illustrations. As she carried him into the living room, Casper realized this wasn't an ordinary home. On the walls hung posters and artwork that mirrored the things he himself had mentioned over the past weeks. A large painting of a tall, majestic woman by a skyscraper, a framed Studio Ghibli print, a shelf lined with old game boxes, and a corner with a small gaming PC and 2 large monitors. A small table was set with tea, snacks, and a stack of books. There was a soft couch, and beside it a low table with a miniature armchair that looked like a doll's seat, almost as if it had been made just for him. Monica carefully set him down on the little chair, her smile wide but slightly strained. "I thought you might like to have your own spot here. I set it all up over the weekend," she said, gesturing around. "Games, books, pictures, things you've mentioned. It might be silly." She sat down on the couch, her hands folded in her lap. "I just wanted you to feel at home right away." Casper looked around. It felt like stepping into a catalog of his interests, but also in a strange way like looking into a mirror that showed he had been observed for a long time. "This is incredible," he said quietly. Monica blushed faintly, her gaze lowering. "I'm glad you like it. I've paid attention. I listened to what you liked when you were with the other girls. I wanted to get it right." She looked up again, and for the first time her smile wasn't the perfect mask of a club president. It was human, a little nervous. "I don't want to scare you, Casper. I've been waiting a long time to have you here. I just wanted you to feel safe." She stood and went into the kitchen, beginning to gather a few things. "I thought we could make something light together, like the others did. Maybe dinner, maybe just tea, but you can choose." Casper glanced around the room again, still overwhelmed. "It feels like you've done so much for me," he said softly. Monica let out a quiet laugh, but there was a shadow in the sound. "I have," she admitted. "More than you know." She turned back toward him, her eyes glimmering for a moment, a mix of warmth and something deeper. "But today isn't about secrets. Today is just for us." She set a small plate in front of him, poured tea for herself, and sat back on the couch. "Tell me, how does it feel to be here? Is it what you expected?" The room was quiet, the scent of tea filling the air, while outside the last light of the sun slipped behind the rooftops. For the first time, Casper was alone with Monica, and he could feel that something important had just begun. Chapter 51. Monica's True Face. The evening light had faded completely. The house was silent. The only sounds the faint hum of Monica's computer in the corner and the rhythm of their breathing. The scent of tea had drifted away, and the candles cast soft shadows that danced across the walls. Monica sat on the couch with a cup in her hands, Casper resting in the little armchair before her. Her smile was no longer the wide, polished smile of the club president. It was smaller, softer, but also more intense. She looked at him as if she had finally decided to speak. "Casper," she began slowly. "There's something I've wanted to tell you since you came here. You've been asking yourself why you're here, haven't you?" Casper frowned and nodded. "Yeah, I've wondered the whole time. Was it you who pulled me into the game?" Monica shook her head gently, her smile faint. "No, not this time. I was just as surprised as you were when I saw you. I didn't think anyone from outside could enter again." She gazed down into her cup, as if peering into something deeper. "But when you appeared, I realized you're different from the others." She lifted her eyes again, and for the first time there was a shimmer in them that felt both warm and chilling. "You're free in a way I'm not. I'm trapped in this world. I can see everything, but I can't leave." A lump rose in Casper's throat, confusion growing. "But you said you could get me out?" She leaned forward, her voice still gentle but her words heavier. "I can show you a way. I can create things here. I can change the code. I can give you anything you've ever dreamed of. If you stay here with me, you can have everything you long for." Her finger traced the edge of the table. "You love the Giantess world, don't you? I can make it your reality. I can be that for you." Her hair fell forward like a curtain as she leaned closer. "Here, I'm not just a girl in a club. Here, I'm almost a god. I can give you everything, but you have to stay." A chill ran down Casper's spine. Her tone was still kind, but in her gaze burned a dark glow, a hunger that made the room feel smaller. Monica? His voice was low. I'm glad to be here, but I also want to go home. I don't even know who I am in here. I need to find out. She stared at him, and for a moment her eyes went blank, like mirrors without reflection. Then she blinked and leaned back. Of course, she said softly, though her voice had taken on a deeper resonance. Of course you do. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I just don't understand. I've waited so long for you to come, and now you talk about leaving. Casper shifted uneasily. I don't fully understand either, but I can't just forget who I am. Monica set her cup aside, folding her hands slowly. I can show you everything you want to see. I can be everything you've wished for. You don't have to be afraid. She tilted her head, and the candlelight made her face appear both beautiful and haunting at once. I can give you freedom without pain, but the choice is yours. The room felt heavier, as if the air itself had thickened. Casper's heart pounded. She still looked at him with warmth, but there was something else, something greater than love, greater than control. Something that could consume him if he wasn't careful. Chapter 52, The First Escape. The room grew strangely still after Monica's words. The dim glow of the screens in the corner flickered like a heartbeat, and the candles were nearly burned down. Casper's pulse quickened. There was power in her voice now. More than just words, it was as if the walls themselves responded to her. I can give you everything, she whispered, rising to her feet, everything you've ever dreamed of. She took a step forward. Her shadow stretched across the floor, spilling over him, vast and wavering. For the first time, it hit him how small he truly was in her presence, how easily she could close the world around him if she wished. Stop, he breathed, backing across the tabletop. I want to go home. She looked at him, and a crooked smile tugged at her lips. Not cruel, but like someone who knew a secret he didn't. Home? She echoed softly. Home to what? You were already small there. She took another step. The floor creaked beneath her shoe. From Casper's view, her legs rose like pillars, her feet sliding closer to the edge of the table. Every movement was immense. Her presence filled the entire room. Instinct took over. He leapt from the table, landing hard on the carpet, and began to run. Everything was gigantic down here. The couch loomed like a cliff, the chairs like towers. Behind him, her footsteps followed. Not hurried, but heavy and steady, like drum beats. Casper? Her voice rolled low, almost amused. Where are you going to run? She let out a soft laugh, not mocking, but tinged with wonder. I won't hurt you. He ran, but it was like moving in a dream, each step dragging against the floor. His heart hammered, and when he looked up, her silhouette swelled above him, her feet drawing near, her hands stretching forward like a descending sky. For the first time, he felt truly small, not only in size, but in every sense. He was a speck on her carpet, and she was a mountain in motion. Monica stepped closer and paused. She bent down slowly, her hair cascading around him like a curtain, her eyes glinting in the half-light. She extended her hand, not like a claw, but as an open surface. Shh, she whispered. It's okay. I won't crush you. I just want to hold you. Casper froze, his breath short. He looked up, her face filled his vision, close enough to feel like a living wall, and her hand covered his entire view. For a moment, he was struck by the same sensation as in his dream, that she was more than human, something that could give everything or take everything away. Her fingers closed gently around him. With a steady, careful motion, she lifted him up, placing him in her palm. She looked down at him, her expression a blend of warmth and darkness. See? You're safe. With me. Her breath brushed warm against him, her voice a hushed murmur. I promise, I won't hurt you. But don't run from me. I've waited too long. She drew him closer, not tightly, but firmly enough that he felt her pulse. From here, her face was overwhelming, beautiful, yet frightening in its intensity. Now we can talk properly, she said softly, without you running. Chapter 53, The Illusion of a World Garz. The air in the living room crackled as if someone had opened a hidden door in the wall. Monica's computer flickered with lines of code no human eyes were meant to read. She held Casper in her palm, her gaze intense, her voice a blend of whisper and plea. I can give you everything, she murmured. See for yourself. The world unfolded around them like a tapestry. Suddenly, Casper stood in the middle of a wide boulevard of glass and steel. The sky was deep blue, the sun glowing behind drifting clouds, and everything towered over him. Above him rose 4 colossal figures, Sayori, Natsuki, Yuri, and Monica, all in immense versions of themselves. Their hair streamed like banners, their eyes glimmered with light. They looked down on him with smiles both beautiful and overwhelming, like goddesses in a dreamscape. Monica's voice came from every direction, soft yet commanding. Here, everything you've ever dreamed of. No bullying, no pain. You can walk among them, look up at them, be loved by them. I can make them all like this. I can make myself like this. I can worship you if you wish. You never have to be small and alone again. The 4 giants moved around him like living skyscrapers. Sayori's laughter rang like bells, Natsuki's eyes sparkled. Yuri cupped her hands like a protective dome, and Monica knelt so her face filled his entire vision. Her hair fell like a curtain, her hand large enough to cover a street. "Stay with me, Casper," she said softly, though the words echoed like thunder from the heavens. "Here I can set you free. Here I can be everything you want." Casper stood in the street, his heart pounding. The sight was magnificent, everything he had secretly dreamed of, yet twisted, too much. He looked up at the 4 and shook his head. "Monica?" His voice was quiet but firm. "I care about all of you. I'd do anything to help you escape, to give you real lives. But I don't want you to treat me like this. I don't want you to lose yourself for me." The city shimmered faintly. The giant girls froze, waiting. Monica blinked, and for a moment the glow vanished from her eyes. She no longer looked like a goddess, but a trembling girl standing before him. "You say no?" Her voice was hoarse, almost a whisper. "You don't want what I can give?" Casper stepped toward her. Now they were the same size, the illusion unraveling like pixels in the wind. "I want you, the real you. Not a god, not an illusion. I want you to just be yourself." Her hands lowered slowly. The lights of the city dimmed, the towering girls dissolved into dust that rose into the sky. At last, only the 2 of them remained in a quiet space, equal in height, equal in presence. Monica stood before him, her hands trembling. I only wanted to make you happy," she whispered. "I thought that's what you wanted. I thought that's why you came." Casper stepped closer and wrapped his arms around her. "I didn't come for that. I came for all of you, to find out who I am, and to help you if I can." She closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. I don't know if I can let go of this. I'm so used to being everything for everyone." He held her longer, feeling her not as code, but as a person. "Then start by being Monica." Silence fell, the illusion faded, and they were back in her living room, candlelight glowing faintly. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and pressed her forehead to his shoulder. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll try." Chapter 54, Her Real Home. The light flickered one final time like a curtain being drawn back. The city, the towering figures, the glowing code, all crumbled and drifted away like sand through fingers. Casper's feet hit solid ground, and he gasped. He was no longer a speck on Monica's carpet in a vast world. He stood on the floor, solid, real. Beside him was Monica, not a goddess, not a giant, but a girl. Her shoulders were slight, her hands human. He looked down at himself. His body was full-sized again. No screens, no blazing lights, no voices from every direction, only an ordinary entryway with a door leading to a quiet street. The faint smell of coffee and wood lingered like a real home. Monica looked at him, her eyes still damp, but no longer glowing with code. "Welcome," she said softly. "This is my real house." She led him into a living room smaller than the palace of her illusion, a couch with a plaid blanket, a small table with a potted plant, a few books and a shelf. On the wall hung a single photograph, a landscape of a tree by a lake. No posters, no towering art, just a home. Casper followed her. "We're normal size," he said quietly. Monica smiled faintly, wrapping her hands around her teacup as if to hold on to its warmth. "Yes, I let go. I wanted to show you everything I could create. But I think this is the only thing left that truly belongs to me." She sat on the couch and let him sit beside her. The silence between them wasn't heavy now. It felt like a space where they could breathe. "I wanted so badly to be everything for you," she said after a pause. "I've watched you since you entered the game. I saw you with all of them, and I got jealous. I thought if I made everything perfect, you'd stay." She lowered her eyes, her cheeks reddening. "But you want me as myself." Casper nodded. "Yes, that's what I want." She drew a deep breath and held out her hand. Not as a goddess, but as a friend. Then, welcome. I hope you like my home, even though it's ordinary. I've never had anyone visit me like this. Casper took her hand, feeling the warmth of human skin against his own. I do. I like it. She looked up at him, and for the first time her smile carried no shadows. Then we can start from here. No masks, no illusions. They sat together as the last light of afternoon streamed through the window. No code, no goddesses, just two people in a room that, at last, felt real. Chapter 55. Monica's Weaknesses. The living room was quiet, only a light breeze from the open window stirring the curtain. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm orange glow across the coffee table. 2 cups of tea sat steaming gently. Monica leaned forward, hands clasped around her cup, staring into the liquid as if she were reading a book. It feels strange, she said at last, her voice low and hoarser than before. I've always been the one in control, the one who smiles, the one who fixes things. I've never just sat here and been Monica. Casper watched her in silence. He knew sometimes silence was what someone needed to go on. She drew in a deep breath and looked up. I'm afraid of being ordinary, she said. That's my greatest weakness. I've been so used to being the girl who has it all together that I forget what it means to just be human. I built a mask of perfection, kindness, charm, and underneath that mask, I'm insecure, lonely. I've spent years trying to hold everyone together, but no one really sees me. A small, trembling laugh slipped out. I'm jealous, Casper. I was jealous when I saw you with the others. I was jealous that they could open up to you while I was trapped in my role. It made me dark. It made me something I never wanted to be. Her gaze dropped back to the tea. I'm also afraid of being abandoned. I thought if I made myself bigger, more beautiful, more overwhelming, you'd stay, but all I did was scare you away. She looked up again, her eyes glistening. That's my weakness. I'm not a goddess. I'm not perfect. I'm just a girl trying to figure out who she is in a game she didn't write the rules for. Casper leaned forward and placed his hand over hers. Monica, what you just said isn't weakness. It's strength. It's courage. She blinked quickly, as if holding back tears, and gave him a small, trembling smile. Maybe it's the first time I've ever said it out loud. She inhaled deeply, leaning back slightly against the couch. I can't promise I'll never fall back into old patterns, but I'll try. I want to be myself. I want to learn how to be with someone without hiding behind code and illusions. She looked at him, and in her gaze there was neither desperation nor perfection, only a quiet plea to be seen. Will you stay a little longer? Not as my prisoner, as my friend. Casper nodded. Yes, I'll stay a little longer. Monica exhaled, as though a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Then let's finish our tea. Just sit here for a while. It's the first time my home has ever felt like a home. She took a sip, and the silence around them was no longer empty, but full of possibility. For the first time since he'd arrived, Monica wasn't a leader, not a goddess, just a human being, slowly beginning to find herself. Chapter 56, Letting Go. The tea was gone and the room was still. Monica sat with her hands wrapped around the empty cup, her shoulders slightly slumped, her eyes no longer hidden behind a perfect smile. She looked at Casper, sitting beside her at normal size, fully human. I've thought a lot while you've been here, she said quietly. I wanted to save you all. I wanted to make you free. But the truth is, I can't. I can't break the boundaries of the game. I can only change small things. I can only create illusions. She bit her lip, her hands trembling slightly. But there's one thing I can do. I can let you go. Casper looked at her, feeling the weight of her words. Monica? She drew a long breath, closed her eyes for a moment, and continued. I know it will hurt. I know that when you leave, this place will be empty again. But you showed me what it feels like to be seen. You helped me be Monica. And I can't keep you trapped anymore. She stood and walked to her computer. The screen flickered to life, lines of code spilling downward like rain. I can't free Sayori, Natsuki, Yuri. They're written into this place. But you're not written. You're free. She glanced over her shoulder, eyes shining. If you want to go home, I can open the door for you. Casper rose slowly and joined her. Monica, I want to go home, but I also don't want you to be alone. She let out a quiet, broken laugh. I've always been alone. That's the nature of the game. But you showed me I can still be something else if I dare. That's enough for me to keep fighting. She turned, placing her hands on his shoulders, warm, human hands. When you go through, you might forget some of this, but I'll remember, and that's okay. I'll be here, not as a goddess, but as Monica. Casper wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. She trembled, but then embraced him back, holding tightly. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for seeing me. The screen behind her flashed, an opening in the code, a doorway glowing with light. Monica slowly released him, though her hands lingered for a moment longer. Go, she said softly, before I lose the courage. Casper took a step toward the light, then turned back to see her one last time. She stood there. No glow, no code, just a girl in a quiet room who had chosen to do the right thing, even though it hurt. He nodded. Goodbye, Monica. She smiled, and it was real without masks. Goodbye, Casper. Be free. And with one final glance, he stepped into the light. Chapter 57, back in his room. A faint hum, a distant light behind closed eyelids. Casper inhaled and felt the mattress beneath him. No lavender, no teacups, no towering figures, just his own blanket and the familiar scent of electronics and dust. He slowly sat up. The room was half dark, the glow of his PC screen in the corner. He rubbed his eyes, heart still pounding heavy. Was it a dream? He whispered into the silence. Everything looked normal. His chair, his headset, the poster on the wall. The mouse lay on the desk exactly where he had left it. On the screen was the Doki Doki Literature Club menu. He hadn't closed the game. He clicked the mouse. The familiar menu appeared. But instead of New Game or Load Game, bold, clear letters read, Thank you for everything, Casper. He stared. A cold shiver ran down his spine. His fingers hovered over the mouse. He clicked Start, but the game didn't launch. Instead, the words appeared. You've completed it. We won't forget you. Casper leaned back in his chair, hands trembling slightly. It wasn't a dream. It couldn't have been. He closed his eyes for a moment, Monica's face rising before him, her final smile stripped of masks. When he opened his eyes again, the screen was blank. Only a white cursor blinked in the corner. His thoughts raced. If I tell anyone, will they believe me? Or will they think I've lost it? Can I ever go back? Do I even want to? He looked down at his hand. Resting in his palm was a small, dried lavender blossom. Its scent was faint, like a whisper from another place. Casper closed his hand around the flower and drew a deep breath. Outside, dawn had broken. He turned toward the window, while behind him the screen powered off completely. The story ended here, but inside him, a world still lived.